Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You might fall asleep before the end, so you don't miss future stories. Now, relax, close your eyes, and let's begin. My job is simple. Sit in a small room, watch the security feeds, and make sure no one sneaks into the Midway corporate tower after hours. It's an old office building downtown, 20 floors, mostly empty at night, except for the occasional late worker. I don't mind the solitude, I actually prefer it, but last night something changed. It started at 2:43 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was checking the cameras, just doing my routine scan, when I saw him. A man standing in the lobby, perfectly still. He wore a dark suit, but his face was wrong. It was too blurred, like the camera couldn't focus on him. He didn't move, didn't shift, just stood there, staring directly at the camera. I grabbed the radio. "Control, this is Ryan. We've got an intruder in the lobby." No response. I frowned and checked the other cameras. The lobby feed was live, and yet, when I switched to the elevator cam, the lobby was empty. I switched back. He was still there. I leaned closer, staring at the grainy black and white footage. My stomach twisted. The timestamp still read 2:43 a.m. It wasn't moving. The camera feed was frozen. I clicked out and back in. The screen glitched for a second, and suddenly the lobby was empty. No man, no movement, just the silent, dimly lit entrance. I exhaled slowly, probably just a glitch in the system. Old cameras sometimes freeze, it happens, but something about it felt wrong. And then, down the hallway, a motion detector beeped. Someone was on the 14th floor. The motion detector beeped again. 14th floor. I stared at the security monitor, watching the dimly lit hallway. The offices were supposed to be empty, no cleaners, no late night workers. But the motion sensor doesn't lie. A chill crawled down my spine. Maybe it was a rat, or a stray bird that got trapped inside. Yeah, had to be, but deep down I knew better. I switched through the 14th floor cameras, scanning for movement. Nothing. Then, as I hovered over camera 14, I saw it. A door was open. Office 1407. I checked the logs. That door had been locked at 7:00 p.m. I was sure of it. The security system automatically logs every door that opens after hours, and there had been no record of that one being unlocked. So why was it open now? I swallowed hard and grabbed my flashlight. The live feed showed nothing inside, but the uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't let me ignore it. I radioed again. "Control, this is Ryan. I've got movement on the 14th floor. Office 1407. No workers scheduled. No keycard logs. I'm checking it out." Silence. That was the second time no one answered. I hesitated, but my job was my job. I clipped my radio to my belt, grabbed my baton, and stepped out of the security room. As I rode the elevator up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The doors slid open with a quiet chime. The 14th floor was freezing. The air had a stale, static charge, like a storm was about to hit. Down the hall, Office 1407 stood open. The door slightly ajar. I stepped closer, my shoes silent against the carpet. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. Just desks, chairs, filing cabinets. I let out a slow breath. Probably just a door someone forgot to lock. Maybe the motion sensor picked up something outside, an air vent kicking on, or a shadow moving past the window. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, low, garbled, coming from inside the office. I raised my flashlight, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Hello," I called. "Security. If someone's in here, you need to come out." No response. I stepped inside. The whispering stopped. I swept my flashlight over the desks, then turned toward the back corner, and that's when I saw it. A security monitor, just like the one in my office, but this one was on, and it was showing a live feed of me. Standing in the room, I felt my blood turn to ice. This was impossible. There were no security monitors in this office. The only feeds were in my room, and then something moved behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing, but when I turned back to the monitor, my own reflection was missing. The screen just showed the empty office. But I was still standing there, and then, just for a second, I saw something else, a figure, tall, blurred. Standing right behind me, the screen glitched, and the lights in the office flickered off. The lights flickered off. For a second, the only glow in the room came from the security monitor. The grainy feed of the office was still displayed, but I was missing from it. I was standing right in front of the screen, my flashlight beam casting long shadows. But on the monitor, there was nothing. The room was empty, and then the feed glitched. A burst of static warped the screen, twisting the image. When it cleared, my reflection was back, but I wasn't alone. A figure stood behind me, tall, featureless. Its face was just a blank, smooth surface. Its head tilted slightly, as if watching me, studying me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing was there. My breath came out in short, uneven bursts. I turned back to the monitor, but the image had changed again. Now the figure was closer, the screen flickered, and the door behind me slammed shut. I lunged at it, grabbing the handle. Locked, a sound rose in the room. Low, distorted whispers, coming from the monitor. I turned back, pulse hammering. The feed was changing again, frame by frame. First, the figure in the room, then, a close-up of my own face. Then something new, a timestamp, 3:42 a.m., that was 2 minutes from now. The screen flickered again, now showing static. I didn't wait. I grabbed my radio, pressing the button so hard my fingers hurt. Control, this is Ryan. I need immediate assistance on the 14th floor. Something's happening. I repeat, I am locked in office 1407, and there's something wrong with the cameras, and no response. Just static. I slammed my fist against the door. Hey, anyone out there? No answer. I checked my watch. 3:41 a.m., 1 minute left. I turned back toward the monitor. The static had cleared. A new image was on the screen. The hallway outside. At first, it looked empty, but then, movement. Someone was walking toward the door. I froze, watching as the figure came closer. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, like a puppet being dragged by invisible strings. Its head was tilted too far to the side, like its neck had been broken. It stopped right in front of the door. Just standing there, listening, a long, unnatural pause. Then, slowly, the handle began to turn. I backed away, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. My heart pounded as the door handle shook. I braced myself ready for whatever was on the other side. But then everything stopped, the handle, the static, and when I turned back to the monitor, the hallway was empty. The silence in the room was suffocating. I stood there, gripping my flashlight, staring at the empty hallway on the monitor. The door handle had stopped rattling. The whispers had vanished, but I knew something had been there. I forced myself to breathe, glancing at my watch. 3:43 a.m., 1 minute past the timestamp from the monitor. Whatever was supposed to happen, it was over. I reached for the door handle again, expecting resistance. But this time, it turned easily. The hallway was just as empty as the camera had shown, but I didn't trust it. My skin crawled as I stepped out, scanning both directions. Nothing. The air felt heavier than before. The kind of heaviness that makes your ears ring, that tells you you're being watched. I started walking. The 14th floor stretched out in front of me. A row of dark offices and cubicles bathed in dim, emergency lighting. My footsteps echoed too loudly, then a sound, soft, faint, a single footstep, not mine. I stopped, holding my breath. Silence, then another step. From behind me, I turned sharply, flashlight slicing through the dark. No one was there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I swallowed hard and kept moving, faster this time, aiming for the security elevator. I just needed to get out of here. I reached the elevator and jammed the button. The small display flickered. In use, that was impossible. I was the only one in the building. I grabbed my radio again. Control, this is Ryan. If anyone is hearing this, I need a status on the 14th floor elevator. Is there someone else in the building? Static. Then, a click. A faint, crackling voice came through. But it wasn't from Control. It was my own voice. If anyone is hearing this, I need a status on the 14th floor elevator. Is there someone else in the building? The exact words I had just spoken replayed back at me. But the tone was wrong, stretched, distorted, like it was being spoken by something that didn't fully understand how words worked. I stared at the radio, my pulse hammering, then a ding. The elevator doors slid open. I raised my flashlight and nearly dropped it. There was someone inside, a man, dressed in a faded security uniform, just like mine, but his face, it wasn't right. His eyes were too wide. His mouth was stuck in a frozen grin. His skin looked like stretched, waxy plastic. And then, slowly, he tilted his head, like a broken marionette. A strangled noise caught in my throat. I stumbled back just as the elevator doors slammed shut. The floor indicator above the doors flickered again. The numbers began counting down. 13, 12, 11, he was coming down. The floor numbers on the elevator display ticked downward. 10, 9, 8. I backed away from the doors, my breath coming in shallow bursts. My mind screamed at me to run, to get as far from that thing as possible. But my legs felt glued to the floor. 7, 6, 5. A shiver crawled down my spine. The air around me felt wrong. Thicker, heavier. It was as if the whole building was holding its breath. Then the elevator dinged. The doors slid open. For a moment there was nothing. Just an empty, dimly lit elevator car. And then the lights flickered. A shadow stretched across the floor. Something moved. I stumbled back as a figure stepped out. It was the same man, the thing I had seen before, the fake security guard. His uniform was faded, the name tag unreadable. His eyes, they weren't right. Too wide, too empty, like they were just painted on. And that smile, that awful, frozen grin. He stood there, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, not moving, not blinking, just staring at me. I forced my body to react, to move, to run, but the second I took a step back, he mirrored me. I stopped. He stopped, my pulse pounded in my ears. Slowly, I raised my hand, his arm lifted too, not smoothly, but in a jerky, puppet-like motion, as if he was learning how to move. I swallowed hard. What do you want? My voice came out barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. He only tilted his head farther. Too far, his neck gave a sickening crack. Then he took a step forward. I turned and bolted. I sprinted down the hallway, past the dark offices and empty cubicles. My footsteps echoed in the silence, my breath ragged. Behind me, I heard footsteps, fast, jerky, unnatural. I didn't dare look back. I rounded a corner, nearly slipping as I threw myself toward the emergency stairwell. I slammed into the door, fumbling with the handle. My hands were slick with sweat, shaking, locked. My stomach dropped. I spun around, my back against the cold metal door. The hallway stretched out in front of me, the flickering lights casting long, shifting shadows. The footsteps had stopped, but the figure was still there, standing at the other end of the hall, half hidden in darkness. Watching, waiting, I forced myself to breathe, think. There had to be another way out, another stairwell, another exit, something. Then, the radio on my belt crackled to life. A burst of static, then a voice, low, garbled, but familiar. Don't run. My blood ran cold. It was my own voice. I froze. The radio crackled again, distorting my own voice as if it had been recorded and played back through layers of static. Don't run. My breath hitched. My fingers hovered over the radio clipped to my belt, too afraid to touch it. My heartbeat was a hammer against my ribs. The figure at the end of the hall didn't move, but I swear, I could feel it smiling. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to press the button on my radio. Who is this? My voice came out hoarse, uneven. Silence, then you know who I am. The air turned ice cold. My skin prickled. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, I don't." Static hissed through the speaker, then the voice. My voice spoke again, then turn around. I didn't. Every instinct screamed at me not to move, not to react. The way you freeze when you sense something watching you from the darkness. But I didn't have to turn around, because I felt it. The presence behind me. So close, I swear I could feel breath on my neck. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay perfectly still. If I moved, if I so much as flinched, what then? Something pressed against my shoulder, not a hand, something cold, metal, the radio. It was in my hand, but I could feel it pressing into me. Like someone else was holding it. I sucked in a sharp breath. And then, from behind me, a voice whispered in my ear. "Run." I didn't think. I just moved. I shoved off the door, sprinting down the hall. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. The footsteps behind me exploded into motion. Fast, too fast. The sound was wrong, like something with too many limbs skittering after me. I veered left, pushing through a side door, my pulse pounding in my ears. I was in another hallway now. But something was different. The air was thicker. The walls seemed closer. Then I saw it, the same hall. The same doors, the same flickering lights. I had just run in a circle. No, I knew I had turned. I knew I had gone left. There was no way. The radio crackled again. "You're almost there." A chill ran down my spine. I looked down at the device, my fingers gripping it so tightly they ached. I hadn't pressed the button. The voice on the radio wasn't me anymore. It was different, too deep, too hungry. "Don't fight it, just keep going." And then the lights flickered once more. When they came back on, the figure was standing right in front of me. The figure stood inches from me. The air crackled with something unnatural, something wrong. My legs locked up, my brain screaming at me to move, to run, to do anything but stand there. I couldn't. The figure wasn't like before. It had changed. Its features were sharper, clearer. The shape of a man, but not quite. The eyes weren't eyes at all, just voids, swallowing the dim light of the hallway. The mouth, still slightly open, wasn't moving, but I heard it. I heard it inside my head. "You're almost there." The same voice from the radio. A whisper slithered through my skull like fingers dragging over my brain. "Let me in." My vision blurred, the world tilted. My own heartbeat sounded wrong, off rhythm. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. I needed to go. I needed to. The lights went out. Total darkness swallowed everything. I choked down a scream. The air shifted beside me. Something moved, close, too close. I reached for my flashlight with shaking fingers, my breaths coming out sharp and uneven. The switch clicked. The beam cut through the blackness and landed on the figure's face. No, not a face. My face, it was me. I was staring at myself. A perfect mirror image, standing right in front of me. But the eyes, ***, those empty, hollow sockets, ***, they weren't mine. The mouth opened, stretching too wide, too deep. And then it lunged. I threw myself sideways, hitting the floor hard. The flashlight spun from my grip, rolling across the tiles. Footsteps pounded after me, not normal footsteps, too many, like hands slapping against the floor, like something crawling toward me at an impossible speed. I scrambled to my feet, bolting down the hall. The doors. Where were the doors? The hallway stretched on forever. No exits, no turns, just an endless corridor, flickering lights, and that thing chasing me. I wasn't in the security office anymore. I wasn't even in the building. I was somewhere else. The voice returned, seeping into my ears like oil. "You can't run from yourself." I wasn't listening. I wasn't. I kept running, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my chest burning. Then, a door. It appeared out of nowhere, standing at the very end of the hall. A single red exit sign flickered above it. I didn't stop to question it. I grabbed the handle and wrenched it open. Cold air slammed into me. I stumbled forward, into nothing. The ground wasn't there. I was falling into blackness. I was falling. falling for so long that time lost meaning. The darkness wasn't just dark, it was thick, like a living thing wrapping around me, pressing against my skin, squeezing my lungs. I tried to breathe, nothing. Tried to move, nothing. My limbs weren't mine anymore. My body wasn't mine. The void had swallowed me whole. Then I hit the ground. I should have broken every bone in my body. Instead, I landed softly, like I had been placed there, not dropped. I gasped, dragging in cold, stale air. My head spun. I tried to push myself up, but my hands sank into something. Not floor, not ground. Something softer, thicker. I forced my flashlight up. Oh God, the floor was made of faces, staring, twisting, moving. Mouths opened in silent screams. Hands reached from the flesh, clawing at my legs. I stumbled back with a strangled cry. My foot sank into something warm. I yanked it free, nearly vomiting. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. A sound echoed through the space, a laugh. I spun around. The corridor was gone. The security office was gone. I was in a room with no walls, just endless black stretching beyond the mass of writhing bodies beneath me. And at the center of it all, him, the man from the cameras. He was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the dark, his form wrong, stretched. He smiled. I recognized that smile. It was mine. A cold dread seeped into my bones. "What do you want?" I forced out. The thing wearing my face tilted its head. "I already have what I want." The voice slithered through the air, inside my head. "Now, you just have to accept it." I shook my head, stepping backward, my stomach twisting. No, this isn't real." It took a step forward. The faces on the ground twisted, mouths moving in unison. Not real. They whispered. The sound rattled my skull. "You're already here." The thing stretched its arms wide, and behind it, I saw them, hundreds of them. Figures just like him, just like me, standing, waiting, smiling. I turned. The darkness had shifted. A door. I ran for it, shoving it open, and stepped through. I slammed the door behind me. Darkness swallowed the space, but it wasn't the thick, suffocating void from before. This was different, colder. I reached for my flashlight. My fingers trembled as I flicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, and I nearly screamed. I was staring at myself, not just one reflection, hundreds. I was in a hall of mirrors. Everywhere I turned, I saw me. My face staring back at me, but something was wrong. The reflections weren't mirroring me, they were watching. I swallowed hard, stepping forward. My boots echoed against the smooth floor. The air was thick with the scent of something old, something rotting. I moved carefully, my breath coming fast. Each step forward made the reflections shift, but not like they should. Some of them lagged behind, some of them didn't move at all. One of them smiled. I stopped. My pulse hammered. Slowly, I turned my flashlight toward the glass. The reflection wasn't me. The man from the cameras. Grinning, waiting, a whisper slithered through the room. "Come closer." I spun, my flashlight flickering. The mirrors trembled, distorting, the reflections rippling like water. I wasn't alone. Something moved behind the glass. Dozens of hands pressed against the surface, stretching the glass like it was skin. Fingers curling, reaching. A sound, soft at first, then growing. Laughter, not from me, not from the reflections, from behind the mirrors. I turned, heart pounding. I needed to get out, now. I took a step back, and my reflection didn't. The other me stayed still. His grin widened, then. He moved, but not like a reflection. He stepped out of the mirror. I stumbled backward, my breath caught in my throat. The figure that had been my reflection was now standing in front of me, but it wasn't me. The shape was wrong. His eyes were too deep, too hollow, like looking into a bottomless pit. His grin was too wide, stretching past the limits of his face. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, studying me, and then he mimicked me. I lifted my hand, he did the same. But his movements were delayed, like a recording struggling to keep up. Then, he took a step forward. I took a step back. He laughed, not a human sound, not something that should come from a mouth. a noise like glass scraping against glass. I turned to run. The mirrors around me warped as I moved. The reflections weren't right. Some were too slow. Some too fast. Some weren't me at all. I reached out blindly, searching for an exit. My fingers brushed against smooth glass. Then something grabbed me. A hand, cold, clammy, real. I yanked back, heart hammering. The thing that had been my reflection was still smiling. But now he wasn't alone. The mirrors were opening, and others were stepping out. The laughter grew. More voices, some high pitched, some deep and guttural. I ran. I didn't care where I just ran. The walls twisted, the mirrors shaking, cracking. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision. Then, up ahead, a door, the only one I'd seen. I sprinted toward it, my boots pounding against the floor. The reflections followed. Their footsteps echoed, but they didn't match mine. They were faster. I reached the door, threw myself against it, and it opened. I tumbled through, slamming it behind me. Silence. I was in a new hallway, dimly lit, stretching into darkness. The air was thick, heavy. The walls pulsed, almost as if they were breathing. I wasn't safe. I wasn't alone. I turned my head slowly, my breath coming in shallow gasps. There was a mirror in the center of the hall. Tall, wide, cracked, and standing behind the glass was me. But this time I wasn't moving. My own reflection stood still. Not a flicker of movement, not a rise and fall of breath. It was me. But it wasn't me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My hands trembled as I slowly lifted one, testing it. My reflection didn't follow. Instead, it stared at me. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it smiled. Not my smile, not anything human. It stretched too wide, too unnatural, twisting its face into something that shouldn't exist. I staggered back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The mirror shuddered. The cracks in the glass spread. And then it stepped forward. I ran. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, the lights flickering overhead. My boots pounded against the floor, my breath coming in sharp, desperate gasps. Behind me, the mirror shattered. Glass rained down, but there was no sound, just an eerie, hollow silence. Then, footsteps, not mine, faster. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see what had come out of that mirror. All I could do was run. Up ahead, a door loomed in the dim light. Unlike the others, this one was open. I sprinted toward it, my lungs burning. The footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. As I reached the doorway, something brushed against my shoulder. Cold, clammy, wrong. I lunged forward, slamming the door shut behind me. Silence. I was in a security office. Dim monitors flickered in the darkness, casting eerie glows across the room. A desk sat in the center, scattered with old, yellowed reports. I turned, pressing my back against the door, heart hammering. On the monitors, the cameras were still running. The lobby, the hallways, the stairwell, and then the security room. I froze. The feed showed me, standing exactly where I was. But I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the dark corner of the room, something was moving. I couldn't move. On the monitor, my own grainy reflection stood frozen. My wide, terrified eyes locked onto the screen. And behind me something shifted. A shadow in the far corner of the security room. Too tall, too thin. Its body seemed distorted, like a bad signal glitching on an old VHS tape. It knew I saw it. Slowly, too slowly, its head began to turn. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The corner was empty. I pressed my back against the desk, my mind racing. The security room was small. No vents, no hidden doors, nowhere to hide. I flicked my gaze between the screens, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Then movement again, not in the room, on camera 4. My stomach twisted. Camera 4 was pointed at the lobby. And there, standing at the entrance, was me. The version of me on the screen wasn't moving. Just standing there, stiff, facing the camera. I swallowed hard. Was this some kind of recording? A glitch? I reached for the radio on my belt, my fingers trembling as I pressed the button. Hello, anyone on duty. This is static. The feed flickered, and when it cleared, the other me had moved. It was closer. Panic clawed at my chest. I looked at the screen, my breath hitching. The figure, my own double, was halfway across the lobby now. But its posture was all wrong. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, its arms hanging limply at its sides. And the eyes, they were just dark holes, empty, hollow, and worst of all, it was looking directly at the camera. Directly at me. I shot up from my chair, knocking over a stack of papers. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I had to leave. Now I reached for the door handle, and the monitors flickered again. For a split second, the cameras cut out. Then they came back, and my double was gone. I stopped breathing. I scanned the screens, flipping through the feeds as fast as my shaking hands would let me. Where was it then? I found it, camera 7, the hallway, just outside the security room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned, and the door handle twisted. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a metal flashlight, and stumbled backward. The door creaked open, and standing in the doorway was me. I gripped the flashlight so tight my knuckles went white. The thing in the doorway, my double, stood motionless. It had my face, my clothes, every detail perfectly copied, except for the eyes. Two black hollow voids stared back at me. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, and then it smiled. I staggered back, heart hammering. The thing took a step forward, not a normal step. A jerky, unnatural movement, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Its head tilted to the side, mouth stretching wider, teeth too white against the darkness of its face. Then it spoke, but not in my voice. The words came out glitched, warped, like a corrupted audio file. "You shouldn't be here." My stomach turned to ice. I tried to speak, but my throat locked up. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then the thing moved faster. 1 second, it was at the door, the next, it was inches from my face. I barely had time to react before it lunged. I swung the flashlight hard. It cracked against its head. Except there was no impact. The light passed through the figure, like swinging at smoke. And yet the thing shuddered. It glitched, its form flickering, as if I had hit a hologram. For the first time, the smile vanished, and I saw something else. A flicker of fear. That was all I needed. I turned and ran. I burst out of the security room, nearly tripping over my own feet. The hall was empty. The air felt wrong, too still, too quiet, like the entire building was holding its breath. I didn't stop. I sprinted down the hall, toward the nearest exit. The front lobby doors were locked, but I had the keys. Then I saw the monitors. The ones mounted in the lobby, they were still on. Every camera feed was flashing between static and something else. Something impossible. The security footage was playing in reverse. Time itself was rewinding. The front doors unlocked themselves. The papers I had knocked over in the security room flew back onto the desk, and then I saw myself, walking backward, straight into the security room, as if none of this had ever happened, as if I had never left. I stumbled back, my vision swimming. No, this wasn't right. I turned toward the glass entrance doors and froze, because standing outside, watching me through the glass, was me. I stared at myself through the glass doors. He stared back, same face, same uniform, but there was something wrong about him. His eyes were too calm, his posture too still, like he'd been waiting for me. And then he raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and pointed behind me. I spun around. The lobby was empty, no movement, no sound, but the moment I turned back, he was inside. I staggered backward, heart hammering. He hadn't opened the doors, hadn't stepped inside. He was just there, standing in the lobby, like he'd always been. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I needed to get out now. But as I turned to run, the lights cut out. Total darkness. My breath came fast and shallow. Somewhere in the blackness, I heard footsteps, slow, measured, circling me. I gripped the flashlight and clicked it on. Nothing. The lobby was empty. but the footsteps were still there. Right next to me, I swung the light wildly, sweat dripping down my back. The footsteps stopped, a breath right in my ear. "You're not supposed to be here." I turned and bolted, racing past the front desk, down the hall, toward the emergency exit. I didn't care about alarms, didn't care about my job. I just needed to get out. But as I reached for the handle, the door vanished. The entire hallway changed, the walls stretched, the exit was gone. I wasn't in the building anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere wrong. The halls were twisting, warping. The security monitors on the walls flickered to life. I turned to look, and my stomach dropped. Every screen was showing me, from seconds ago, running, panicking. And on every screen that thing was right behind me. Getting closer, I whirled around, but there was nothing. Just the long, stretching hallway. The air was thick, too thick. Like I was standing in something that wasn't quite real. I turned back to the monitors. One of them had changed. It showed something new, something waiting ahead. The elevator, the doors were open. A single red light glowed inside, waiting, inviting. I didn't want to go in. But I didn't have a choice, because behind me, the hallway was shrinking, walls closing in, my own reflection in the monitors warping. I took a shaky breath and stepped forward, into the waiting elevator. The doors slid shut, the air went still. I pressed every button on the panel, nothing, no movement, no sound, then a soft chime. The overhead light flickered, and the elevator began to descend, slowly, too slowly, like it wasn't going to another floor, but somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. The elevator descended, slow, too slow, like it was moving through something thicker than air. The panel had no floor number, no buttons worked. I was trapped, and then ding, the doors slid open. The hallway beyond was wrong. The walls concrete, cracked, the air damp, suffocating. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. I stepped out. The moment my foot hit the ground, the elevator doors slammed shut behind me. I turned. No button. No way to call it back. I was stuck, and ahead the hallway stretched into darkness. Something about this place felt off. This wasn't part of the building. I'd worked here for months. There was no basement. At least there shouldn't be. But somehow I was here. I had to find another way out. So I walked forward. The hallway seemed endless. Doors lined the walls, each one slightly open. The lights above buzzed, flickering every few steps. I passed the first door and peeked inside. Empty. Just an old desk, a chair, and a security monitor. The screen glowed. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering. And when I saw what was on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was me, standing in the hallway, a live feed, except something was behind me. I spun around, nothing. Just the empty hall stretching behind me. I turned back to the screen. The thing was closer. No face. No details, just a shape, standing right where I had just looked, watching me, waiting. The screen glitched. A single word flickered across it. Run. I didn't hesitate. I bolted down the hallway. Doors slammed shut as I passed them. Lights flickered wildly overhead. And behind me, footsteps. Not mine. Faster. Closer. A turn in the hall, a metal door at the end. I lunged for it. Locked. I slammed my fist against it, panic rising. The footsteps were right behind me now. A breath hot on my neck. I turned, my heart in my throat, and everything went black. I woke up somewhere else. Cold floor, stale air, silent. A single light bulb swung overhead, and in the dim light I saw them. Rows of monitors, each screen showing security footage. I pushed myself up, my pulse pounding. One screen showed the lobby. Another, the empty hallways upstairs. And then the elevator. The doors were open, and someone was standing inside. Someone wearing my uniform. He stepped out. The camera feed glitched, and then he looked up, right at the camera. Right at me, and smiled. I couldn't breathe. The man on the monitor, he was me. Same uniform, same posture. But his smile, it was wrong. Too wide, too knowing, and he was looking directly at me. Like he knew I was watching. Like he wanted me to see, I had to move. I stumbled back, searching the room. Concrete walls, a rusted metal door. No windows, no exit except a single staircase. Leading up, I hesitated. I didn't want to go back up there. But I had no choice. I turned back to the monitor one last time. The fake me was still standing in the lobby. But he wasn't looking at the camera anymore. He was looking at the elevator, waiting for something. Or someone. I swallowed hard and started up the stairs. Each step groaned beneath me. The air grew warmer. Stale, metallic like blood. I reached the top and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I gripped the handle, took a breath and pushed it open. I was back in the security office. Everything looked normal. The monitors hummed softly. The desk lamp flickered. But something was off. I stepped forward. My chair was occupied. Someone was sitting there, watching the screens. He turned and my blood froze. It was him, the man from the monitor, the fake me, sitting in my chair. Smiling, I took a step back, my pulse thudding. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me. Then he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." His voice was flat, not mine, like he was still learning how to use it. I clenched my fists. "Who the hell are you?" The smile widened. "I'm you." I lunged, grabbed him by the collar cold. Like touching a corpse, his face shifted just slightly, like his features were trying to rearrange. He leaned in close. "Go back downstairs." His breath was wrong, like a whisper made of static, like a voice from an old tape recorder. I gritted my teeth. "I'm not going anywhere." His grin disappeared, and his eyes darkened, a deep, endless black. And then the room plunged into darkness. I staggered back, heart slamming, total blackness, like the lights had been swallowed. Like the room didn't exist anymore. And then a whisper, not from in front of me, but from everywhere. "You should have stayed in the basement." I turned. A door, a red exit sign glowing at the end of the hall. I sprinted for it. The air grew thick, like running through water. Something cold brushed my arm, fingers. Grabbing, I burst through the door and found myself back in the hallway. I spun around. The security office door was gone. Like it had never been there. Just smooth, endless wall. No sign of the fake me. No sign of the monitors. Just me, standing in a hallway that suddenly felt too empty. And then, the radio on my hip crackled to life. A voice, my voice, speaking just 2 words, "Turn around." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My whole body locked up, like some unseen force was pressing down on me. The voice on the radio, my voice, had spoken just 2 words, "Turn around," but every instinct in me screamed, "Don't." The hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long. The red exit sign flickered. I forced my feet to move. One step, then another. My own breathing sounded too loud in the silence. Behind me, the radio crackled again. Static, a whisper trying to form words. Then, "You're going the wrong way." I kept walking. The air grew heavier, thick like molasses. My limbs felt sluggish. The walls were they getting narrower. I pressed forward, each step harder than the last. Then a door, not the exit, but a plain, gray metal security door. It hadn't been there before. I reached out, and the second my fingers brushed the handle, the radio screamed. A burst of static and voices, layered over each other. My voice, another voice, a dozen voices. "Turn around, turn around, turn around." Panic flared in my chest. I grabbed the handle, twisted. The door swung open, and beyond it darkness. A room with no light, no walls, no floor. Just a yawning, endless void. And in the void something moved. A shadow stepped forward, tall, wrong. The shape of a man, but shifting, like smoke trapped in human form. I tried to move, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The shadow took another step. The air plunged to freezing. A whisper slithered out of the darkness, a voice not my own. "You're not supposed to be here." The walls shook. The red exit sign flickered wildly. The radio let out a horrible screech. And in a blink, the hallway was gone. I gasped, stumbling back. No hallway, no exit. I was standing in the lobby. As if I'd never left. The front desk, the elevators, the monitors, everything was back to normal. Except he was there, standing behind the desk, wearing my uniform, smiling, like he'd been waiting for me. I couldn't move. The thing behind the desk, it was me, same uniform, same posture, same face, but the eyes, they weren't mine. They were too still, too dark, a dull, lifeless black, and it was smiling. I forced a breath. My fingers twitched. Every instinct screamed to run, but I didn't. I took a step forward. It didn't react, just kept watching. Like it was studying me. The monitors flickered, the security feeds. I glanced at them, and my stomach dropped. They were showing me, standing in the lobby, but from every angle, different cameras, different points of view. As if I was everywhere at once. My head pounded. This wasn't real. This wasn't possible. I turned back to the thing behind the desk. It still hadn't moved, just kept staring. Then it spoke. "You're late." The voice was wrong. It was mine, but distorted. Like hearing yourself on an old cassette tape. I swallowed hard. What are you?" It blinked, slowly. Then tilted its head, like it was considering the question. Then it grinned wider. "I'm you, but better." The air turned heavy. I took another step back. The monitors flickered again, now showing, not just me, not just the security feeds, but other places, other people, places I didn't recognize, people sleeping in their beds, a child's room, a gas station, a hospital hallway, hundreds of images flashing too fast to process, and then one froze. A live feed of my apartment, and my bedroom, empty, except for a figure standing in the dark, staring at my bed. Waiting, my breath caught. This wasn't just about the building. It wasn't just happening here. I turned back to the thing. But it was gone. The desk was empty. Only the faint smell of burnt plastic lingered in the air. The radio crackled. One last whisper, "You shouldn't have seen that." Then silence, and behind me a new hallway had appeared, leading somewhere that shouldn't exist. The hallway wasn't there before. I knew this building. Every floor, every locked door, every dusty, forgotten corridor. But this was new. A long stretch of linoleum tile, dim emergency lights buzzing overhead, walls too narrow, like they were pressing inward. It shouldn't be here. It couldn't be here, but it was, and at the end of it, a door. The air was thick. Like stepping into a pressurized room. The silence wasn't empty. It felt heavy, watching. I glanced at the monitors again. The live feed of my apartment was still there, still showing my empty bedroom, still showing the thing standing in the corner. Motionless, waiting, for what? For me. I forced my legs to move. One step, then another. The hallway narrowed as I walked. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. The emergency lights above flickered. The walls felt too close. Like they wanted to swallow me. I reached the door, no handle, just a keypad, numbers faded from use. And above it, a small screen, flickering with words I didn't understand, lines of text blinking in erratic patterns. But one phrase stood out. It wasn't in the same strange script. It was in English, and it sent ice through my veins. "This is where he comes through." A sound behind me, a sharp, wet click, like footsteps on tile, but not human. Not quite. I turned slowly, and saw the thing wearing my face. It was standing at the mouth of the hallway, watching me, expressionless, except for the smile, the too wide, too perfect smile. It raised a hand, and pointed at the door. My stomach twisted. "What's in there?" I whispered. The thing tilted its head, like it was considering. Then it spoke in my voice, something old, something patient. Then, softer, something hungry. The keypad beeped. I flinched. The screen changed. New words appeared. 3 simple commands. Enter code or wait. IT will open soon. I turned back to the thing, but it was gone. The hallway behind me was empty. Only the flickering lights remained, and the faint, distant sound of a door unlocking. Somewhere I couldn't see. Somewhere getting closer. I didn't enter a code. I didn't have to. The screen flickered again. the words shifting like static before fading into something new. Access granted. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. A wave of cold air spilled out, carrying a scent I couldn't place. Something damp, old, metallic. I stepped forward, not because I wanted to, but because it felt like I had to. The hallway behind me hummed. The air thickened. Something was shifting. The building was changing. I had the sickening feeling that if I turned around, if I tried to go back, there wouldn't be a way out. Inside the room, the lights were dim. A low red glow pulsed from the walls, like something was breathing. The walls were lined with monitors, more cameras, more feeds. I moved closer, my pulse hammering. Each screen showed a different part of the building. Places I recognized, places I didn't, places that shouldn't exist. One monitor showed my security office. The desk, the chair, the screen still flickering with static, but I wasn't there. Another monitor showed my apartment. Still empty, still showing the thing in the corner, but it was closer to the bed now. Then another screen. One I didn't recognize. It was a long, white corridor, stark, featureless, except for the thing standing at the far end. Not moving, not approaching, just watching. Its face was blurred, like the camera couldn't fully capture it. But I knew it was me, or something that looked like me. The sound of breathing filled the room, low, raspy, behind me. I turned and my stomach dropped. There was someone else in the room. No, not someone. Something, sitting in a chair against the far wall. Its back was to me, hunched over. Its skin was wrong. Like it had been stitched together. Like it wasn't supposed to be here. Like it wasn't supposed to exist. I took a slow step forward. The thing shifted. Its neck cracked as it turned, just enough for me to see one side of its face. And in the dim red glow, I saw it. A smile, too wide, too perfect, too much like mine. The lights flickered. The monitors glitched. For a split second, all the screens changed. Every single one now showed the same image. A door, wide open, darkness spilling out, and something crawling through. A voice whispered behind me. Soft, almost gentle, "You should have waited." The door behind me slammed shut, and then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I couldn't see my hands, couldn't see the monitors, but I could hear something moving. Shuffling, breathing, the air thickened, pressing against my chest, and then a whisper. "Why did you open the door?" It was right behind me. I spun around, nothing, but the whispering didn't stop. It grew louder, more voices, murmuring, laughing. Crying, I backed up, my hands reaching for the walls, but the walls weren't there anymore. I was somewhere else. Somewhere wrong. A dim blue light flickered to life ahead of me, a screen, the only thing in the darkness. And on it, my security camera feed, showing the hallway outside the locked door. Only, it wasn't empty anymore. A figure stood there, not moving, not breathing, watching. I squinted, my stomach twisting. It was blurry, shifting, like it wasn't fully real. But I could see enough. It was wearing my uniform. It was wearing my face, and it was smiling. The static crackled. The screen flickered, and the thing moved, closer to the camera, closer to the door, my door. It reached up, placed a hand against the glass, and slowly pushed. The door swung open. My security office was no longer safe. The thing was inside, and I was trapped here. In the dark, with something else, I felt a presence shift behind me, breath warm, damp, against my ear. And then a voice, "You shouldn't have let him in." Something grabbed my wrist, tight, cold, and pulled. The blue screen blinked out, and the darkness swallowed me whole. I was falling. Not in the way your stomach lurches when you miss a step. Not in the way dreams pull you into the abyss just before you wake up. This was different, real, like gravity had betrayed me, like the floor had ceased to exist. The air was thick, wrapping around me, muffling my screams, and then I stopped, not with a crash, not with an impact. Just stopped, suspended in a darkness so complete it felt alive. Then a light, a single, flickering security monitor. And on it the hallway, the door to my office. But something was wrong. The me standing there wasn't moving anymore. It had entered the office, my office. The door was still open, and the camera's grainy feed showed my chair. The flickering desk lamp, but the chair wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in it. I squinted, my pulse hammering. Me, I was sitting there, not moving, not blinking, just staring at the camera. And then, so slowly it made my breath hitch, the other me smiled. The screen flickered. The image glitched, distorting for a second, and then the thing stood up, it turned. Looked toward the open door, looked toward the hallway, toward me, and then it stepped forward, out of the office, out of the screen, and into wherever I was. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness around me shivered, the air turned colder. And then a whisper, low, distant, yet somehow right in my ear, "You gave up your place." I choked on a breath. "What?" The whisper came again, closer. "He took your seat." The monitor blinked out, and I was alone. Or so I thought, because something breathed behind me. Something moved, and this time it wasn't me. The breath on my neck was wrong, too slow, too measured, like whatever was behind me was savoring the moment. I wanted to turn around, I wanted to run, but I couldn't, because deep down, I already knew if I turned around, I'd see myself. The me that had taken my place. The darkness around me wasn't just empty space. It was thick, pressing against me. Like I had been swallowed whole. The silence stretched, suffocating. And then, at last, a voice, low. Familiar, "You were too slow." I clenched my fists. "What do you mean?" A pause. Then, closer this time, "You hesitated." The air shifted. A weight settled over my shoulders, unseen but undeniable. Then, fingers that weren't mine pressing against my shoulder. I flinched, but they held firm, cold, too cold. They gripped me like a vice, nails digging in, and that voice, the one that should have been mine, whispered again, "Now it's my turn." The monitor flickered back to life. The security feed returned, showing my office. And him, the me sitting in my chair, he was smiling. His eyes locked onto the camera, onto me, like he knew I was watching. Then he reached forward and turned off the camera. The screen blinked out, and I was left in the dark. Trapped, I struggled, fought against the invisible hold, but the more I thrashed, the tighter the darkness pulled. It wasn't just keeping me here, it was dragging me down, deeper, further, into a place I couldn't escape from. And above me where I had been, something else was walking free, wearing my face. The blackness pulled at me, twisting, stretching, swallowing. I clawed against it, but my hands met nothing, just an endless, crushing void. And above me, in the world I once stood, someone else was living my life. Someone wearing my face. The darkness wasn't just emptiness. It had movement. Shapes shifted in the void, watching me. Their outlines flickered, indistinct, as if they weren't meant to be seen. Whispers surrounded me, hundreds, maybe thousands, some panicked, some resigned, some screaming, and then, one voice rose above the rest. "You don't belong here." I spun toward the sound, even though I couldn't see. "Where am I?" My voice came out thin, like the darkness was eating it. Another whisper, closer. "The place behind." Behind what? The world, the mirror, the camera, the places people forget to check. A pause, then, closer now, and no one ever comes back. Panic surged through me. No, I wasn't staying here. I wasn't just going to let that thing steal my life. I forced my body to move, to fight against whatever force was holding me back. Something cracked in the dark. The whispers stopped. A pressure shifted, and then light. It was faint, distant, a tiny glow in the endless black, but it was something. I reached toward it, my hands trembling. The moment my fingers touched the light, I felt cold air. I wasn't gone yet. I was still close to the world, still close enough to push through. I pressed against the light. It resisted like a thick glass barrier. But through it I could see my office, my chair, and him, the one who stole my face. He wasn't alone anymore. There was someone standing in front of him, Eric. His expression was uneasy. He glanced toward the cameras, the ones I had always watched him from. The thing wearing my body smiled. Then it spoke, my own voice, my own words, but they weren't mine. "Don't worry, Eric. Everything is under control." No, no. I slammed my fists against the barrier, but no sound came through. Eric's frown deepened. He was hesitating. Maybe, just maybe. He could sense something was wrong. I banged harder, and this time the light cracked. The crack in the light spread. Thin fractures spiderwebbed across the invisible barrier, and with every hit, every desperate push, the space between the worlds shuddered. On the other side, Eric shifted uncomfortably. His fingers twitched at his side, like some part of him, some deep, buried instinct, was telling him that something was wrong. I had to break through. I had to make him see. The thing in my body tilted its head. "Eric," it said, still using my voice, "are you feeling okay?" Eric didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered to the cameras, the exact place I used to sit, the exact place I should have been right now. I slammed my fists against the barrier. "Eric." The crack widened. The thing inside my body flinched. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something other than confidence in its expression. It was subtle, just a flicker, but it was there, a shadow of uncertainty, a moment of hesitation, and Eric saw it too. "Actually," Eric muttered, taking a small step back, "I think I left something in my car. Be right back." My imposter stiffened. "You don't have to do that," it said. "Stay here, we can talk. I need your help with something." Eric froze. Then he turned back slowly, eyes narrowing. "You never ask for help." I punched the barrier. The entire thing shattered. A tidal wave of darkness rushed past me, pulling, dragging, clawing until suddenly I felt gravity. I felt weight. I was falling, and then I hit the floor of my office, gasping for air. Eric's eyes went wide. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over himself. "What the thing in my body whipped around, and for the first time we were face to face. It wasn't just wearing my face. It was perfect, the same eyes, the same mouth, the same everything, but as I stared at him, something changed. The skin shifted just slightly, like fabric being stretched the wrong way. Eric saw it too, his breath caught in his throat. And then the thing lunged at me. The thing that wore my face lunged. I barely had time to react. 1 second, I was on the floor, gasping for air. The next, I was rolling, dodging the weight of my own stolen body crashing down where I'd just been. Eric yelped, stumbling back toward the desk, knocking over a stack of reports. Papers flew everywhere. I scrambled to my feet. My limbs felt weak, like I'd just been dragged through something I wasn't supposed to survive. But I was back, and I wasn't about to let this thing take my life. The imposter moved like me, but wrong. A fraction of a second too late. A little too smooth, like a recording played at half speed. It was subtle, but now that I was staring it down, I could see the tiny flaws. It cocked its head, expression calculating. "You shouldn't be here," it said, my own voice, my own damn voice. I clenched my fists. "Neither should you." Eric was frozen. His eyes flicked between us, me and the thing, and I could see the panic setting in. "Which one of you is real?" he whispered. The thing smiled. "I am." I took a step forward, shaking my head. "No, Eric, listen to me. We've worked together for years. You know me." He swallowed hard. His fingers twitched toward the security baton on his belt. And then the thing attacked again. It was fast, but this time I was ready. It lunged, aiming for my throat, but I ducked, grabbing a chair and swinging it between us. The impact sent the thing staggering back into the desk. Eric cursed, stumbling away, but he didn't run. He was watching, waiting, trying to figure out which of us was telling the truth. The imposter wiped its mouth, and when it lifted its head again, its face was slipping, just slightly, like a mask made of melting wax. Eric's breath hitched, and that's when I knew. He saw it. For a moment there was silence, and then Eric ripped the baton from his belt. He didn't hesitate, didn't even speak. He swung it straight into the imposter's head. The impact was sickening. Like hitting something that wasn't quite solid. The thing screamed, a sound that wasn't human, and then it collapsed. Eric was panting. I was too. We stared at the crumpled thing on the floor, its stolen skin still shifting. Still fighting to keep my shape. Eric's voice was hoarse. What the hell is that thing? I shook my head. I don't know, but I wasn't sure it was dead. I wasn't sure it could die at all. And then the security monitors flickered, and the cameras showed something else. Something outside the building, more of them. Eric was still catching his breath when the security monitors flickered again. For a split second, the screens turned to static. Then the feed returned, but the images weren't normal. The parking lot camera, the west hallway, the stairwell. Every screen showed the same thing, more of them. Dozens, all wearing my face. I felt my stomach drop. Some stood motionless, staring up at the cameras with empty, soulless eyes. Others twitched, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they were still adjusting to their stolen skins. One of them, one that looked exactly like me, tilted its head, just like the first one had. Then it smiled at the camera, and raised a hand, not to wave, to knock, on the glass doors of the security office. The sound was soft at first. A light tap, then another, then bang. Eric jumped. Jesus, bang, bang. I turned toward the door. The security glass was strong, reinforced, but even that didn't feel like enough, because the thing outside wasn't alone. They were all knocking now. Eric backed away, gripping his baton. His voice was shaking. What the hell do we do? I stared at the monitors. There were too many. Even if we ran, where would we go? They were in the hallways, near the exits. The building was practically surrounded. My mind raced. Think, there had to be something. And then I saw it. One of the screens had changed. It was the basement camera, and unlike the others, it wasn't filled with them. It was empty, except for the stairwell door. Wide open, and beyond it, darkness. I swallowed hard. The basement. Eric turned to me. What? I pointed to the screen. It's the only way out. They haven't reached it yet. His brow furrowed. And what happens when they do? I had no answer for that. But we didn't have time to debate, because outside the door the knocking stopped. For a moment there was nothing. Just silence, thick, heavy, wrong. Eric and I barely breathed. Then the handle turned. Click, click, click. Eric moved first. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me toward the emergency door at the back of the office. We go now. I didn't argue. We bolted through the door, slamming it behind us. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by the flickering overhead lights. The stairwell to the basement was just ahead. We ran, but behind us the office door opened, and footsteps followed. So many footsteps. We hit the stairwell at full speed, nearly tripping as we dashed down. The air was colder here, damp and stale, like the basement had been abandoned for years. Eric fumbled for the flashlight clipped to his belt, flicking it on. I glanced up. At the top of the stairs they were watching. Standing in the doorway, at least a dozen of them, every single one wearing my face. And then they moved. All at once, coming straight for us. Eric and I hit the bottom of the stairs hard, nearly losing our balance as we stumbled into the darkness. The air down here was wrong. It smelled of dust, mildew, and something else, something damp, metallic. Like old blood. Eric's flashlight flickered as he swept it across the room. Concrete floors, rusted pipes. Rows of metal shelves stacked with forgotten boxes and broken equipment, and no exits. I turned, heart hammering. At the top of the stairs, they were still standing there, motionless, silent, watching. Then they started moving. Not walking, not running, falling. One by one, they dropped down the stairs, slamming against the walls, their limbs twisting in ways they shouldn't. Some landed in broken heaps, their bodies crumpling like rag dolls. Others twitched, pushing themselves back up. And then they crawled, straight for us. Move. I shouted, grabbing Eric's arm. We ran deeper into the basement, dodging between the metal shelves. My mind was screaming, there's no way out. There's no way out. Eric cursed under his breath. frantically scanning the room. His flashlight caught something in the corner. A door, not a normal one. An old, rusted vault door, no label. No sign, just heavy steel with a massive wheel lock in the center. But it was slightly open. Eric didn't hesitate. He shoved his shoulder against it, forcing the door wider. A cold gust of air rushed out, air that smelled ancient, untouched. Behind us, the sound of scraping and wet, unnatural breathing grew closer. I turned just in time to see one of them lunging forward. One that looked exactly like me, but with hollow black eyes and a grin too wide for its face. I barely dodged in time. Eric grabbed my arm and yanked me through the door, and then we slammed it shut. The moment the heavy steel door sealed, the noises outside stopped. No scratching, no crawling, no whispering. Just silence. Eric and I stood there, panting. Sweat dripped down my back. My hands were shaking. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Eric lifted his flashlight, turning to face the room we had just trapped ourselves in. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls. Not concrete, stone. Old, ancient, almost like a tunnel. This isn't part of the building, Eric whispered. I swallowed hard. He was right. The basement of the security office was modern, but this place felt wrong. The walls were damp, the air was thick, and further ahead, the tunnel sloped downward. Eric exhaled. We either stay here and hope those things don't get in. I didn't need him to finish. We had no choice. We had to go deeper, and so we walked into the dark. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Not just cold. This was something else. A damp, unnatural chill that sank into my bones, making my breath come out in weak, foggy puffs. Eric's flashlight flickered as we moved, casting long, jerky shadows along the stone walls. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on us like a weight. I didn't want to say it, but we were somewhere we weren't supposed to be. The tunnel sloped downward at an unnatural angle, like it hadn't been built for people. The walls were smooth, too smooth, almost like they'd been worn down over time. By what? I didn't want to know. Eric whispered, "What the hell is this place?" I shook my head. Not part of the building. He gave me a look. No kidding. The passage twisted and turned, making it impossible to tell how deep we were going. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal. And then we heard it, a sound ahead, a slow, wet dragging noise. Both of us froze. Eric lifted his flashlight, his hand trembling just enough to make the light shake. The beam landed on the ground a few feet ahead, and I saw it. A trail. A long, smeared streak across the stone floor, like something heavy had been pulled through here. And it was fresh. Eric and I exchanged a glance. Keep moving, or go back. Neither option was good. Behind us, the creatures waiting, watching. If we turned back, we'd be walking into them. Ahead, something else. Something we hadn't seen yet. Eric swallowed. We don't have a choice, do we? I shook my head, so we kept going. The deeper we went, the worse it got. The walls had changed. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. The smooth stone was now etched with something. Not writing, not symbols, scratch marks, some deep and jagged, others light and frantic, like fingernails clawing at the rock. Like something had been trapped down here. Then Eric hissed, "Wait." I stopped. His flashlight had landed on something just ahead. A door, massive, old, wooden, reinforced with metal bands, sitting deep in the stone as if it had been built to keep something in. Or keep something out, and worst of all, it was slightly open, a crack of blackness beyond. Eric shot me a look. "Do we open it?" I stared at the dark gap between the door and the stone wall, a space just wide enough for something to peek through. My gut screamed no, but my legs were already moving. We had to know. Slowly, carefully, we stepped forward, and we pushed it open. The door groaned as it swung open, the sound echoing into the void beyond. A wave of damp, stale air hit us like a physical force. It smelled of earth and rot, like something long buried had just been unearthed. Eric's flashlight barely cut into the darkness ahead. The space beyond the door was massive, stretching out beyond what our lights could reach. The walls disappeared into the blackness, the ceiling lost above us. And then a sound, a breath. I grabbed Eric's wrist, stopping him from stepping forward. Something was in there. The air felt thick, charged, unnatural, the way a room feels right before a lightning strike. Eric's flashlight flickered again. And then, the beam landed on something. A chair. No, a throne. It sat in the center of the cavernous space. Massive, ancient, wrong, made of something dark, something that looked almost organic, like the roots of a tree had twisted together to form a seat. But the longer I looked, the more I saw shapes in the wood. Faces, dozens of them, mouths frozen mid-scream. Eric swore under his breath, "What the hell is this place?" I didn't answer, because I was looking at something else. Something sitting in the chair. It wasn't moving. At first, I thought it was a statue. Its skin pale, gray, stretched too tight over its bones. Its fingers long, ending in sharp, blackened tips. It looked old, like it had been here for centuries. But then I noticed its chest, rising, falling. It was breathing. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Eric took a shaky step forward, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The beam shifted, moving up the thing's body until it hit its face. And we saw its eyes. They were open, and they were looking right at us. A low, rattling exhale filled the room. Then the thing moved. The thing in the chair stirred. A slow, deliberate movement, like something that had been asleep for centuries and was just now remembering how to wake up. Eric took a step back, his breath coming in short gasps. I could hear the click, click, click of his flashlight button as he tried to brighten the beam, but the light only flickered weaker, as if the darkness in this room was swallowing it whole. Then the thing's head snapped toward us. I froze. The movement was unnatural, too fast, too precise. Its black, hollow eyes locked onto me first, then to Eric. Its mouth, thin and colorless, began to part, revealing teeth that were far too long. Eric let out a strangled sound and grabbed my arm. "We need to go." But my legs wouldn't move, because the thing wasn't just looking at us. It was studying us, like it recognized us, like it had been waiting for us. A deep, inhuman rattle filled the room. A sound that started in its throat and spread into the walls, the floor, the air. I felt it in my bones. And then it spoke. 3 words, "You are late." I felt Eric's grip tighten on my arm. He was shaking, but whether it was fear or the strange pressure building in the air, I wasn't sure. The thing rose. The throne it had been sitting on seemed to creak and sigh, almost as if it was alive. As if it didn't want to let go of whatever this thing was. Its movements were jagged, wrong, like something wearing a human body but not used to it. And then, it took a step forward. "Run," I whispered. Eric didn't need to be told twice. We turned and bolted. The hallway we had come through stretched out ahead, but somehow it felt longer, like the space behind us was expanding. I could hear something behind us, not footsteps, not breathing, but something else, like whispers, thousands of them, rising and falling in an unnatural chorus. I didn't dare look back. We made it to the metal door. Eric grabbed the handle and yanked. It didn't budge. I slammed into the door behind him, clawing at the rusted edges. "Move, move, move." Eric cursed under his breath, then threw his entire weight against it. The door groaned, then burst open. We stumbled into the security office, slamming the door shut behind us. For a moment, we just stood there, panting, staring at each other in shock. But then, the monitors flickered, and on the screens I saw it, the thing, standing right outside the door. Waiting, watching, smiling. The thing on the screen didn't move. It just stood there, inches from the security office door, staring into the camera with that horrible, stretched grin. Eric and I backed away, our breathing ragged. "Tell me that door is locked." Eric whispered. I nodded, but my stomach felt sick. The lock was old, rusted, barely holding the latch in place. And then the screen flickered. The figure was gone. Eric let out a shaky breath. Maybe it left a bang. Something slammed against the door. We jumped back. The door shook violently, as if something on the other side was testing its strength. Eric grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and wedged it under the handle. "This isn't going to hold." I didn't argue, because the thing outside wasn't trying to get in. It was waiting. The air grew thick. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in clouds. A noise, not a knock, not a whisper, but something in between. It slid under the door like smoke. A soft, scraping voice that slithered through the cracks. "You are still here." I felt my stomach twist. The lights flickered. Eric grabbed my arm. "We need to find another way out." I was already scanning the room. The security office was small, too small. One door, one vent. I pointed there. Eric didn't hesitate. He yanked the metal cover off, tossing it to the floor. "You first." I didn't argue. I crawled inside, my shoulders squeezing against the metal walls. Behind me, I heard Eric grunt as he followed. Then the door handle turned. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. Eric shoved the vent cover back into place just as the door swung open. For a second, I thought we were safe. Then I heard it, breathing, slow, deliberate. The thing was inside. We didn't stop crawling. The vent stretched forward, the metal cold against my palms. Behind me, I heard Eric struggling to stay quiet. Then the whisper came again, but this time inside the vent. "I see you." I froze, because the voice wasn't behind us. It was ahead, waiting. I froze. The whisper echoed through the vent, slithering through the darkness ahead of me. "I see you." Eric stiffened behind me. "Keep moving." He hissed, but I couldn't, because something shifted in the vent up ahead. A shape just barely visible in the dim glow of the emergency lights behind us. It was crawling toward us. I couldn't breathe, my muscles locked in place. Then Eric shoved me forward. "Go." I didn't have a choice. I scrambled forward on my hands and knees, trying to ignore the sound of metal groaning beneath us. The thing in the vent moved faster. I could hear it dragging itself along the metal, its joints popping, fingers scratching. The whisper came again, closer now, too late. Up ahead, the vent split into two paths, left or right. I didn't have time to think. I took the left tunnel, crawling as fast as I could. Eric was right behind me, his breathing ragged. Then I heard it, a deafening crash. Something slammed into the metal behind us. I glanced back. The right path had collapsed. Eric stared at it. Why? Died. It knew which way we'd go. It was hurting us. We crawled in silence. Every few feet, I glanced back, but the thing wasn't behind us anymore. That made it worse, because that meant it was ahead. The vent sloped downward. My palms were slick with sweat as I crawled faster, praying this led to an exit. Then, a grate, up ahead, I could see the dim glow of the hallway beyond. Salvation. But as I reached for it, a hand shot through the bars. I screamed, scrambling backward. The hand was wrong. The fingers were too long, too thin. The nails, cracked and jagged. It reached for me, curling, beckoning, then it gripped my wrist. The air in the vent vanished. A suffocating cold wrapped around me as the fingers tightened. I struggled, trying to pull away, but its grip was impossible. The whisper slithered into my ear, impossibly close. Almost, then Eric kicked the grate with everything he had. It snapped open. Light flooded the vent as we tumbled out, hitting the cold tile of the hallway. The second I hit the floor, the hand let go. The whisper vanished. I turned back. The vent was empty. We sat there, gasping for breath. My wrist burned where the thing had grabbed me, my skin ice cold. Eric clutched his knees, shaking. What the hell was that? I didn't have an answer, because I wasn't sure we had escaped. I was starting to think it was never in the vent at all. It had just been playing with us, and now it was somewhere else. Watching, waiting, Eric and I sat on the cold tile floor, gasping for breath. The vent loomed open behind us, but the thing, whatever it was, had disappeared. At least, that's what I wanted to believe, but my wrist still burned ice, cold where it had grabbed me. Eric finally broke the silence. "We need to get out of here, now." I nodded, swallowing hard. Where do we go? He hesitated, scanning the hallway. The security office was still a wreck. The cameras were fried. The main entrance was too far, and we had no way of knowing if it had already cut us off. There's a stairwell near the east wing, Eric said finally. If we can get to the second floor, we might find another way out. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We moved fast. Every hallway felt longer than it should. The walls seemed too narrow, the ceiling too low. My own footsteps echoed strangely, like there was a half-second delay, like someone else was walking just behind me. Then tap, 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 the unmistakable sound of bare feet on tile. I grabbed Eric's arm. Did you hear that? His face went pale. Yeah, slowly, we turned our heads. At the end of the hallway, standing perfectly still, was a figure. Tall, hollow-eyed, smiling. My breath hitched. That's him. Eric's voice was barely a whisper. That's the guy from the drawings. Mr. Gray. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there staring. Then, as if responding to some unheard command, the lights flickered. When they came back on, he was gone. I grabbed Eric. Run. We sprinted down the hallway, not looking back. Somewhere behind us, footsteps followed, no longer slow, no longer measured. They were running too. The stairwell door was just ahead. Eric slammed into it, shoving it open. We rushed inside, feet pounding against the metal steps. Up, up, up. I risked one glance over my shoulder. The door at the bottom stood wide open, and something was crawling up the stairs after us. We reached the second floor and barreled through the door. Eric slammed it shut behind us, hands shaking as he fumbled for the lock. Click, we backed away. My chest heaved. Silence, then a single knock. Soft, gentle, right on the other side of the door. I swallowed hard. Eric gripped my shoulder. Neither of us moved. Then a voice, right against the metal. Found you. The voice sent a ripple of cold terror down my spine. Found you. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was calm, like someone greeting an old friend. Eric's grip on my shoulder tightened. What do we do? He mouthed. I didn't have an answer. We were trapped. The hallway ahead stretched endlessly in both directions. No exits, no windows, just the dull glow of flickering overhead lights, and behind us tap, tap, tap. A hand pressed against the door's narrow window. Pale, two long fingers. The lock clicked. It was unlocking itself. Run. Eric and I took off down the hallway. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I didn't dare slow down. I could hear it behind us. Footsteps that weren't ours, faster, closer. Then the overhead lights cut out. We were plunged into darkness. I skidded to a stop, hand slamming against the wall. My breath came out in short, ragged gasps. Eric, nothing. My stomach dropped. Eric. A hand grabbed my wrist. I barely held back a scream until I heard his voice. It's me, he panted. Keep moving. He pulled me forward, stumbling in the dark. I felt the walls, searching for a door, a switch, anything. Then a low whisper, right at my ear, you can't leave. The lights flashed back on. Eric and I froze. And that's when we saw it. We were back where we started. Same hallway, same locked stairwell door. We hadn't moved at all. Eric's face was pale. No, that's impossible. I turned in a slow circle. My heart sank. The hallway was different now. The walls, they were closer. The ceiling lower. And the floor, I stared down. The tiles were wrong, wet, rippling, like I was standing on the surface of a lake. Then, in the reflection beneath my feet, I saw a third figure. Standing right behind us. Eric saw it too. His breath hitched, his grip tightening on my arm. The figure in the reflection was too close. Tall, shadowy, watching. But when I turned around, nothing. The hallway was empty, but the reflection. It didn't change. The figure remained, standing directly behind us. The air grew thick, suffocating, like the walls themselves were pressing in. Eric swallowed hard. What the hell is happening? I didn't have an answer, because the figure in the reflection wasn't just standing anymore. It was moving, reaching for me. I yanked my foot back. The rippling floor sent a cold, unnatural chill through my body. Like I was standing on a sheet of ice about to break. "We have to get out of here," I whispered. Eric's voice was tight. "How? We're trapped." I looked around, desperate. The hallway had shrunk even more. The ceiling now felt inches from my head. The walls pulsed, like they were breathing. And then the lights flickered, and the reflection smiled. Not at Eric, not at both of us, at me. The tiles beneath my feet gave way. A sudden, sickening drop. I was falling. I barely had time to scream before the darkness swallowed me whole. Cold, wet, endless, and then, just as fast as it happened, I hit something solid. Hard, pain shot up my spine. I gasped, coughing, my fingers clawing at the floor beneath me. Concrete. The security office. I was back, but Eric, gone. I scrambled to my feet, spinning in circles. Eric, no answer. The monitors in front of me buzzed with static, the grainy images flickering between empty hallways and locked doors. Everything was normal, except for one screen, the feed from camera 9. My stomach turned. It showed the hallway where we had just been. The walls were normal again, the lights steady, and in the middle of the screen, Eric, standing alone, staring at the camera, mouth open, screaming. Eric's mouth was open in a silent scream, his face frozen in pure terror. I fumbled for the controls, trying to switch cameras, but camera 9 refused to change. The screen flickered, distorting for a split second. And in that glitching moment, I saw something behind him, a hand, long fingers, gray skin, emerging from the darkness, reaching for Eric's shoulder. No, no, no. I grabbed my radio. Eric, can you hear me? Static. He didn't react. The thing behind him was getting closer. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. I spun around, my pulse pounding. The security office door was still locked. The tiny window showed only darkness outside. Another knock. Louder this time. I swallowed hard. Eric. No answer. The monitors buzzed again, and when I turned back, Eric was gone. The hallway on camera 9 was empty. The knocking turned into banging. I stepped back, my breath shaky. I had to think, had to do something. The office phone, I grabbed it, dialing the emergency line. Ring, ring, then click. A voice low and garbled. Closer. The line went dead, and then, from the hallway beyond the door, footsteps. I backed against the monitors, heart hammering in my chest. The door handle rattled, then a whisper, right outside the door, "You left him." My stomach turned to ice. I didn't leave Eric. He was right there. The lights flickered. I turned to the monitors again, desperate. Scanning every screen. There, camera 13. I felt my stomach drop. The feed showed a stairwell, but something was wrong. The steps seemed to go down forever, deeper than they should, into pure darkness, and standing at the top, Eric. He was staring into the void, unmoving. I grabbed the radio again. "Eric, can you hear me?" Nothing. I had to get to him, but before I could move, the monitors glitched again. This time, when the screen cleared, Eric was no longer alone. A figure stood behind him, tall, shadowy, and this time it was looking directly at me. Eric stood at the top of the endless stairwell, unmoving. Behind him, the figure watched me, not Eric, me. My breath caught in my throat. It knew I was watching. The screen flickered again, static crawling over the image like writhing insects. For a brief second, I thought I saw more shapes in the darkness. Silhouettes moving on the steps, writhing just beneath the distortion. And then, the screen cut to black. The radio crackled. A sound came through, not words, a deep, guttural breathing, slow, ragged, like something was trying to speak but had never learned how. Then, just as suddenly, silence. I gripped the radio, my hands slick with sweat. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But Eric was missing. The stairwell he stood in. I had never seen it before, and I knew every inch of this building. Didn't I? I had two choices. Stay in the security office, safe, but leave Eric to whatever was down there. Go find him. I was never good at making smart choices. I grabbed the flashlight from my desk. The emergency stairs were on the far end of the building, near the back exit. If the stairwell on the monitor existed, it had to be there. I stepped out into the hallway. The air felt wrong. Like the building itself was holding its breath. Every step echoed louder than it should. Shadows stretched too long across the walls. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. I turned the last corner and froze. The door was open. The metal emergency exit door, one that should have led to the parking lot, was wide open, revealing stairs descending into total darkness. I swallowed hard. This wasn't supposed to be here. I shone the flashlight down the steps. The light barely penetrated the void. It looked like a copy of the stairwell on the monitor, but I had checked this door hundreds of times on my rounds. There had never been stairs here before. Something cold slithered through my gut. I had a choice, go down or turn back. Then a sound far below, a single ragged breath, and Eric's voice whispering from the dark. "Help me." Eric's voice echoed from below. "Help me." I tightened my grip on the flashlight. My instincts screamed at me to turn around to run, but I couldn't. "Not yet, Eric." My voice came out hoarse, unsteady. Silence, then thump. A slow, deliberate sound, like a footstep on the stairs far below. I took a step forward, then another. My flashlight beam barely cut through the suffocating dark, revealing only chipped concrete and rusted railings. The stairwell smelled old, like damp stone and dust. Like it had been here for decades, not something that had just appeared tonight. I swallowed the knot in my throat and kept going, step by step. The air grew thicker the deeper I went. The kind of thick that presses on your lungs, that makes it feel like something is breathing just behind you. I checked my radio, still nothing, just dead air. I kept walking. Then, after what felt like forever, I saw something in my flashlight beam. I stopped. A door. A heavy, industrial metal door, rusted and dented like it hadn't been used in years. I reached for the handle. "Please don't." The voice came from behind me, a whisper, a breath against my neck. I spun around, flashlight shaking. No one was there. Just the endless, black stairwell stretching up into nothing. A chill ran through my bones. I turned back to the door. It was slightly ajar now. I hadn't touched it. Beyond the crack was pitch black darkness, and then a single eye opened in the void. I couldn't move. The eye, too large, too human, stared at me from the crack in the door. It was motionless, unblinking. The pupil was dilated, swallowing the color around it, reflecting my trembling flashlight beam like the surface of a still pond. A slow, creeping dread coiled around my spine. Then it blinked. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the uneven concrete. My breath hitched in my throat as the door creaked open another inch, revealing nothing. Just a black void. The stairwell around me seemed to fade, swallowed by that endless darkness. My flashlight flickered, the beam struggling against something thicker than air. It wasn't just shadow. It was an absence, a complete lack of anything. Then a voice, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't Eric. It wasn't even human. It was layered, distorted, like multiple voices speaking at once. Low and deep, curling around my ears like smoke. I took another step back. The darkness shifted. Something moved inside it. Not just one thing, many. Limbs too long, too thin stretched out from the blackness, pulling themselves forward, fingers curling against the concrete floor. I saw faces, half formed and shifting, their eyes blinking in and out of existence. I turned and ran. The stairwell twisted and spiraled impossibly, stretching on forever as my boots pounded against the concrete. My flashlight swung wildly in my grip, the beam casting long, erratic shadows that didn't match my movements. Then the whispering started, dozens of voices, chanting, repeating my name. The stairs blurred, the walls pulsed. I was losing my grip on what was real, on what was up or down, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, I slammed into a door. A different one, cold steel, solid, unyielding. My hands fumbled for the handle, and by some miracle, it opened. I stumbled inside. and the moment I did, the whispering stopped. The stairwell behind me was gone. I was back in the security office. Back at my desk, the monitors flickered static. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My radio crackled, and then "Night shift is over." A voice. But not mine, and definitely not Eric's. I turned toward the sound. The security office was empty, but on the desk, right where my paperwork had been before all of this started, was a drawing. A crude, childlike sketch in black ink of me, standing in front of a door, with a single, unblinking eye staring through the crack. I stared at the drawing, my pulse hammering in my ears. The ink lines were jagged, uneven, as if sketched in a hurry, or with an unsteady hand. But there was no mistaking what it showed. Me, standing in front of the stairwell door, and that eye, staring at me from the crack. I reached out with shaking fingers, running my thumb over the paper. The ink was still slightly damp, smudging against my skin. Someone had just drawn this. A slow, creeping realization settled over me. I wasn't alone. I scanned the room, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their sickly yellow glow across the security office. Everything looked normal, but I knew better. My radio crackled to life. Did you see it? I flinched, my breath catching in my throat. The voice was familiar, but not quite right. It sounded like Eric, but it was off, stretched, warped. Like a recording played at the wrong speed. Slowly, I picked up the radio. Eric. My voice barely came out. Silence, then "Don't turn around." A cold sweat broke out on my skin. My entire body went rigid, every muscle locked in place. I gripped the radio tighter, my knuckles turning white. The silence in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could feel it. Something was standing behind me. The air grew thick, pressing against my skin like an unseen weight. A faint sound like fabric shifting, like breathing, whispered through the room. The radio crackled again. "If you turn around, it'll know you can see it." I was shaking now. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to run. But where? There was only one exit, the hallway leading to the lobby, and I'd have to turn around to reach it. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The breathing behind me grew louder, shallow, ragged, too close. My radio crackled one last time. "Close your eyes." My vision blurred as panic took hold. My hands trembled, but I forced them to obey. Slowly, carefully, I squeezed my eyes shut. The moment I did, the breathing stopped. The room fell silent. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3. A gust of air brushed past me so close it sent chills down my arms. Then nothing. I waited. 10 seconds, 20. My fingers twitched at my sides, still gripping the edge of the desk. Finally, I forced myself to open my eyes. The security office was empty. The radio sat silent in my hand. The only thing left behind was the drawing. And this time, there was something new on the paper. A second figure. Standing right behind me, I couldn't move. The drawing sat in front of me, taunting me with its crude, inked lines. The second figure behind me, tall, thin, and wrong, was closer than before. My breath came in short gasps as I scanned the security office. The room was empty, but I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. I grabbed the radio with a shaking hand. "Eric," my voice was barely above a whisper. Static, then. A sound, not from the radio, from the hallway. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I stood up too fast, nearly knocking over my chair. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I took a shaky step toward the door. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, listening. Silence, then tap, 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 knuckles against glass. I turned my head too quickly, my vision swimming for a second. My eyes darted to the security monitors, scanning each camera feed. There, a figure stood in front of the lobby entrance, tall, still, facing the glass doors. I couldn't see a face, just the shape of a man. Motionless, not trying to get in, just waiting. My stomach twisted. I reached for the radio again, but before I could press the button, the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness. A A cold sweat broke out across my skin. The monitors, now nothing but black screens, reflected my silhouette, my own ghostly image staring back at me. I fumbled for the flashlight clipped to my belt, my fingers barely working. The second I clicked it on, my breath caught in my throat. The drawing was gone. I ran the beam of light over the desk, the floor. Nothing, like it had never been there. A faint sound drifted through the air. Breathing, inside the room. I turned the flashlight toward the door. The beam trembled in my hand as I aimed it at the small window in the security office door. For a second, I saw nothing but my own reflection. Then a shadow passed by, not outside, inside the office with me. I whipped around, my flashlight sweeping the room. The desk, the shelves, the corner by the filing cabinet, empty, but I knew I wasn't alone. A whisper slid through the darkness, barely audible. A voice right beside my ear, "You're not supposed to see me." A sharp, cold pressure pressed against my shoulder. I bolted. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I ran straight into the hallway, my shoes pounding against the floor as I sprinted toward the stairwell. My flashlight bounced wildly with every step, casting jagged shadows across the walls. I shoved open the stairwell door and took the steps 2 at a time. The whole building felt wrong. The air was thicker, heavier, like I was running through something invisible. I reached the ground floor and slammed into the lobby doors. They didn't budge. I fumbled with my keys, hands slick with sweat. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Behind me, soft footsteps, slow, steady, coming down the stairs. Tap. Tap, tap. I jammed the key into the lock and twisted. The doors groaned, resisting for a moment before giving way. I threw myself outside into the freezing night air and stopped, because standing at the far end of the parking lot was the same figure from the cameras. Waiting, I took a step back, my breath clouding in the cold air. The figure remained motionless, shrouded in shadow. I couldn't see his face, but I knew he was looking at me. Then he raised his hand, not in a wave, in a warning. And from somewhere inside the building, deep in the darkness behind me, something laughed. I didn't move. The figure at the far end of the parking lot stood perfectly still, hand raised in that eerie, silent warning. The air between us felt thick, charged with something unseen. I wanted to run, to get as far from this place as possible. But my body refused to obey. Then he moved, not toward me, not away. He simply tilted his head, like he was studying me. The breath hitched in my throat. The motion was unnatural, too slow, too precise. And that's when I noticed his shadow. It was wrong. It stretched toward me, unnaturally long under the flickering parking lot lights. But there was no direct light source that should have cast it that way. It was moving. The shadow crept forward, even though the man himself remained motionless. Panic surged through my veins. I took a shaky step backward, my eyes darting toward my car. It was only a few feet away. If I could just bang. A loud slam from inside the building. I spun around. The glass lobby doors had shut. No, not just shut. Locked. My stomach dropped. The keys, I still had them. I reached for my belt. Gone. My keys were gone. My breathing turned ragged. The security office. I must have dropped them when. A sound behind me, scraping. I turned back toward the parking lot. The man was still standing there, but his shadow wasn't. It was closer. Halfway across the pavement now, stretching toward me like something alive. And then, for the first time, he stepped forward. A surge of adrenaline hit me. I bolted, not toward my car. It was too far. I turned and sprinted along the side of the building, my mind racing. Where could I go? The back exit. There was a rear security door near the loading dock. It shouldn't have been locked. I ran harder, my breath burning in my chest. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, not running, just walking. But they were getting closer. I rounded the corner, my flashlight bouncing wildly. The alley behind the building was dark, the single overhead light barely flickering. The metal security door loomed ahead. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the handle and froze. Something was breathing on the other side. Deep, slow, just waiting. I yanked my hand back like I'd touched fire. My pulse thundered in my ears. Trapped, I was trapped. And then a whisper, from both sides, "You should never have looked." The alley light flickered out. The alley was swallowed by darkness, a thick, oppressive blackness that clung to my skin like wet cloth. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The whispers were still there all around me, faint, slithering between the folds of the night. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. I reached for my flashlight. My fingers fumbled over the button, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. Click! A dim beam of light flickered to life. The alley was empty, but something was wrong. The security door, the one I had just tried to open, was now slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. My pulse thundered. I took a hesitant step forward, the flashlight trembling in my grip. The air near the door felt colder, like the heat had been drained from the space entirely. And then a handprint. Pressed against the metal door, not a normal handprint. The fingers were too long. The palm was stretched in an unnatural way, like something had pressed against the surface from the inside. I took a step back. The whispering stopped. For a single, suffocating moment, there was complete silence. And then the door slammed shut. A single, heavy bang that echoed through the alley. I stumbled backward, barely catching myself. My flashlight flickered, the beam sputtering in and out like something was interfering with it. That's when I heard it. Not whispers, not breathing, but scraping. Something was dragging itself against the metal door. And whatever it was inside the building. My mind screamed at me to move. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding against the pavement. The loading dock was ahead, a small ramp leading to another entrance. If I could just make it inside, get to the control room, maybe I could see what the hell was happening on the cameras. The whispering returned, but this time it wasn't behind me. It was ahead. A figure moved in the darkness near the loading dock. Tall, thin, watching. My flashlight flickered then died. I didn't stop. I sprinted forward, straight toward the dock, even as every nerve in my body screamed to turn back. The moment my foot hit the first step, the overhead light snapped on. For a brief second, everything was illuminated. And I saw him, the man from the cameras, standing at the top of the loading dock, smiling. He raised one hand, palm open, facing me. Stop! I skidded to a halt. My breath came in sharp gasps. The man's head tilted. His lips moved. He was saying something. But no sound came out. Then a sound behind me. Slow, dragging footsteps, moving closer. I didn't dare turn around. The man at the loading dock took a single step forward. His mouth opened wider, forming words I couldn't hear. But I understood them. Don't look. A cold hand closed around my shoulder, and then the lights went out. The hand on my shoulder was ice cold, not just cold. Wrong, like it had never felt warmth before. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, fight, scream, anything. But I was frozen. The weight of that hand pinned me in place, pressing down on my bones like I had just stepped into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And then the fingers tightened, a slow, deliberate squeeze. I jerked away with everything I had, twisting my body so hard I nearly lost my balance. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled forward, arms outstretched, blind in the darkness. I didn't dare turn around. Don't look, the man on the loading dock had told me that. Why? What happens if I do? I felt the whisper before I heard it. A breath against my ear. You were supposed to stay. My stomach lurched. I bolted forward, scrambling up the loading dock steps. My hands slammed against the metal door, locked. Damn it. A sharp noise skittered across the pavement behind me. Claws dragging against concrete. I spun around. I couldn't help it. My body moved before my mind could stop it. The alley was still pitch black. I couldn't see anything, nothing, but I felt something. The air had changed thick, suffocating. Like whatever was in the darkness wasn't just watching me. It was waiting for me to take one wrong step. For me to see it, a soft tap, like fingertips against metal. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see the security door, and my stomach dropped. The handle was turning from the inside. I lunged for the nearest thing I could find, a discarded wooden pallet, and shoved it against the door just as it started to open. Something on the other side pushed back, hard. The force sent a deep vibration through the door, rattling the metal. And then it stopped. Silence, but I didn't trust it. My hand flew to my belt, fumbling for my radio. I needed help. Someone, anyone. The static hissed the moment I pressed the button. Loud, too loud. I flinched, pulling it away from my ear, and that's when I heard it. Not static, breathing, deep, ragged, right on the other end of the line. The radio crackled, and then a voice. My voice, he's behind me. My own voice whispered through the speaker, and this time I felt the breath on my neck. I dropped the radio. The plastic cracked against the pavement, the speaker fizzing with static before cutting out completely. But the words still echoed in my skull. He's behind me. My voice, a perfect, breathy whisper, as if I had said it just seconds before. But I hadn't. I could feel it, the breath, right at the back of my neck. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I wanted to turn. Every part of me screamed to turn, to see what was there. But something else, something deeper, warned me not to. Don't look. The man from the loading dock had said that. Why? The air behind me was heavy, charged, like the presence was pressing against reality itself, trying to force its way in. And then a hand brushed against my arm. I bolted. I don't remember making it back inside, only that my hand slammed against the emergency exit door, yanking it open with strength I didn't even know I had. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed, the heaviness gone, like it had never been there at all. I spun around, panting. The alley behind me was empty. The security lights flickered above, buzzing softly. The pavement was bare, no shadows, no whispers, no footprints. It was as if nothing had been there at all. Except for my radio. It lay on the concrete, cracked but still in one piece. The screen flickered weakly, the battery struggling. And then it turned on by itself. The static returned, low and pulsing. I backed away. I didn't want to hear it. But the moment I moved, the static stopped, and the radio spoke one last time. You shouldn't have run. My stomach turned to ice. I slammed the door shut and locked it, but somehow I already knew. It was inside now, and I had brought it with me. The silence felt wrong, not the normal, late, night kind of silence. This was something else, a complete absence of sound, like the world had been muted. I backed away from the emergency exit, pulse thundering in my ears. The radio lay where I'd dropped it, flickering weakly. You shouldn't have run. The words replayed over and over in my mind. I felt watched, but the security feed was dead. The monitors were nothing but shifting black screens, the usual hum of their systems silent. Something had followed me inside. Something I couldn't see. I reached for my flashlight, flicking it on with shaking fingers. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the empty hallway ahead. Empty, but I didn't trust it, not anymore. I needed to get back to the main control room. That was the plan. The only plan. Lock myself in, call for help, wait for my shift to end. I moved carefully, my footsteps too loud in the unnatural silence. Every door I passed felt wrong, like something was just behind it, listening. The hallway stretched ahead, long and dark. The overhead fluorescents flickered weakly, struggling to stay lit. Then, a noise, not loud, not sudden. But there, a breath, not mine. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my grip. The breath came again, slow, deliberate. It was close, too close. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, and the lights died. The flashlight flickered. My heart slammed against my ribs. The breath was behind me. No hesitation this time. I ran, fast. I didn't look back. I tore down the hallway, my shoes skidding on the polished floors. The control room was ahead. Just a few more steps. A shadow moved in the darkness. In front of me, no. I threw myself sideways, barely avoiding it. I hit the floor, rolling hard. My flashlight skidded away, spinning in circles. For a split second, the beam landed on something. A shape, tall, wrong, arms too long, fingers curled. A mouth that shouldn't be there, and then it was gone, just vanished, like it had never been there at all. But I knew better. I scrambled for my flashlight, my hands slick with sweat. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. The door to the control room was only feet away. I lunged for it, yanking it open, and then I heard it. Not a breath, not a whisper, a voice, my voice, right behind me. You already let me in. I slammed the control room door shut and locked it. My breath came in sharp gasps, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my skull. The flashlight beam wobbled over the room, casting shadows against the control panels. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. That voice, my voice, it had spoken right behind me. You already let me in. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. The security feeds were down, but the emergency power had to be working. I just needed to reboot the system. The control panel flickered weakly as I tapped at the keyboard. The screen pulsed, then finally came to life. A grainy, static, filled live feed from the security cameras flickered across the monitors. But something was wrong. The timestamps were off. They weren't showing the present. They were showing a few seconds into the future. I stared, heart pounding. The hallway feed, just outside the control room, was empty. Then a shadow moved into view. Tall, unnatural, too close. It wasn't facing the camera. It was facing the door, my door. The screen flickered again, and suddenly, it wasn't just standing there. It was knocking. Knock. I spun, backing away from the door. Knock, knock. I gripped the flashlight like a weapon, my hands shaking. Then a voice, my voice. You can't hide in there forever. I clenched my jaw, trying to steady my breath. I knew better than to answer. I wasn't going to play whatever game this thing wanted. Instead, I turned back to the monitors, trying to focus. I clicked through the feeds, searching for any sign of help, any way out. Most of the cameras were still down. But one was on, the break room, and someone was inside. I leaned in, my pulse spiking. It was a security guard. Another security guard, but that was impossible. I was the only one on shift. I unmuted the audio, heart hammering. The figure in the break room was talking, muttering, repeating something. I turned the volume up, straining to hear. And then my blood ran cold, because the words coming from the screen were the same ones being whispered right outside my door. I couldn't move. The whispering outside my door was in perfect sync with the words coming from the break room camera. Like an echo or a rehearsal, I swallowed hard, forcing myself to listen. The voice. My voice kept repeating the same phrase over and over. Let me in. You already let me in. Just open the door. I couldn't. I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. But something else caught my eye on the monitor, something worse. The timestamp, it was still wrong. The footage from the break room wasn't from the past. It wasn't live either. It was from 5 minutes in the future. A sharp bang against the door made me jolt. I spun, gripping my flashlight. Another bang, louder, more forceful. The handle rattled. Then the voice changed. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was laughing. Low, raspy, distorted. The sound crawled under my skin, making every hair on my body stand on end. I turned back to the monitor, hands shaking. The break room feed was still playing, but the figure inside the other security guard was moving. He had stood up, slowly, stiffly, his head tilted, like he knew I was watching. I leaned in, heart pounding. That's when I saw it. His uniform, his badge, his face. It was me. My vision blurred as a wave of nausea hit me. The figure on the screen, the version of me sitting in the break room 5 minutes in the future, was staring directly into the camera now. And then, with slow, deliberate movements, he lifted his hand and waved. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. My breath came in ragged gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The feed flickered. The future me was speaking now. No sound, just moving lips. I scrambled for the volume, turning it up. At first, just static. Then, "You can't hide in there forever." I froze. The voice was no longer coming from the monitor. It was coming from behind me. I turned slowly. The door was still shut. Locked, but the voice. My own voice was right behind me. I clenched the flashlight tighter, barely able to breathe. The monitors flickered again. My future self, the one on the break room camera, was standing now, pressing his hands against the screen as if trying to push through. His lips moved again, and this time I didn't need sound to understand. I'm already inside. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. Another bang on the door, then silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, ever so slowly, the handle turned. My body acted before my brain could catch up. I lunged for the desk, yanking open drawers, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. Scissors, a screwdriver. My shaking hands closed around the handle of a utility knife. A sharp click. The door unlocked. I stumbled back, gripping the knife, heart hammering. The door creaked open an inch. Then two, and then I saw him, me, standing in the hallway. Same uniform, same face, but something was wrong. His eyes, my eyes were too dark, too deep, and when he smiled, his lips stretched too wide, like the skin wasn't his. Like it was wearing me. I couldn't move. He took a step forward, then another. I gripped the knife tighter, my breath shallow. "You're not real," I whispered. His grin widened. "Neither are you." I lunged. The blade sliced through the air toward his chest, his throat, anything. But the knife passed straight through him, like he was smoke, like he wasn't really there. And then the lights went out. I was blind, deaf, alone. The monitors shut off. The emergency backup failed. And in the suffocating darkness, I heard breathing. Not mine, right next to my ear. A whisper. "You should have let me in sooner." Something grabbed my wrist, pulled me down, and everything went black. Silence, heavy, suffocating. I wasn't dead. At least, I didn't think so. I could still feel the cold floor beneath me, the stiffness in my limbs, the slow, shallow rise of my own breath. But I couldn't see. The darkness wasn't just a lack of light. It was thicker, heavier, unnatural. Like something was pressing down on me, filling every inch of space. I tried to move. My body didn't respond. Then a sound, soft, wet, breathing, no, dripping from somewhere above me. Something was leaking. I forced my fingers to twitch, my arms to move. My body felt wrong, sluggish, heavy. Like I was waking from anesthesia. And then, a voice, low, whispering, "He's almost ready." Panic surged through me. I forced myself to move, dragging my arms beneath me, pushing up onto my elbows. I still couldn't see. The darkness clung to me like tar, sticking to my skin, my clothes. But my hearing was sharper now. The dripping was closer, faster. I reached out, and my fingers touched something wet, something warm. I recoiled. My breathing was shallow now, my pulse a frantic drumbeat. I forced my legs to move, shifting into a crawl. My hand brushed against something else, fabric. A leg, a person. I reached again, and the leg moved. I wasn't alone. A flicker, like a dying ember, not light exactly, but a shift in the dark, a form. Tall, looming, watching. Then, just as fast, it was gone, but I felt it closer. "You're almost ready." The voice whispered again. This time I recognized it. It was mine. My body reacted. I scrambled backward, breath coming in sharp gasps. My back hit a wall. Cold, damp, solid. I pressed against it, trying to slow my breathing, trying to listen. The dripping had stopped. The breathing had not. It was everywhere now, surrounding me. The darkness shifted again. Not away, toward me. A hand. My hand grasped my shoulder, and then, a whisper, "Wake up." The whisper echoed in my ears. "Wake up." The voice was my own. Something gripped my shoulder, fingers pressing into my skin, cold and firm. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly turned my head, and I saw myself, a face, my face, staring back at me. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the dark. It was me, but wrong. The skin was paler. The eyes were darker. The smile was too wide, and then it spoke. "You're almost ready." I recoiled, shoving away from the thing wearing my face. My back hit the cold wall, my pulse hammering in my chest. What the hell? It moved with me, mirroring my movements like a twisted reflection. I shook my head. This isn't real." "Oh, it is." Its voice was my voice, but the tone was off. Like a distorted recording. "I've been waiting for you to see me." The room felt smaller now. The darkness pressed closer. My breath came in short gasps, and then it reached for me. I lunged to my feet, stumbling back. My legs felt like lead, my limbs too slow, too heavy. The other me tilted its head, smiling. "Don't fight it." I ran. I didn't know where I was going. There was no door, no exit. Just endless dark, but I moved. Footsteps followed. My footsteps, but heavier, faster. The air grew colder. My chest burned, my vision blurred, and then I hit something solid, a door. My fingers fumbled for a handle. There, I twisted it, throwing myself forward. Light blinded me. A hallway stretched before me, narrow and endless. Flickering overhead lights buzzed softly. I didn't stop to question it. I ran. Behind me, the door slammed shut. And the whisper followed, "You can't run from yourself." The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry insects, flickering with each step I took. The hallway stretched on endlessly in front of me. No doors, no windows, just an infinite corridor of pale, peeling walls and a floor that felt too soft beneath my feet. But I didn't stop running. Behind me I could hear it. Not footsteps, breathing. A slow, measured inhale. A deliberate, dragging exhale. It wasn't my breath. It was his, the other me, the thing that had worn my face. "You can't run forever." The words weren't spoken aloud. They crawled into my mind. I kept moving, even as my legs screamed in protest. My vision blurred at the edges, but I couldn't stop, because I knew. If I stopped, he would catch me. And if he caught me, I wouldn't exist anymore. The hallway twisted. My stomach lurched as the walls suddenly curved inward, bending like something organic, like I was trapped inside a throat. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall. The surface was damp, pulsing beneath my fingers like living flesh. I wanted to scream, but the second I opened my mouth, I heard it again, almost there. The whisper came from inside my own head. And then a door, at the end of the hallway, standing impossibly still, as if it had been waiting for me. I sprinted for it, lungs burning, every nerve in my body screaming. Behind me, the breathing grew closer. And just as I reached for the handle, a hand clamped onto my shoulder, fingers digging in hard, cold. Wrong, familiar, time's up. The grip on my shoulder tightened, cold, unyielding. I didn't turn around. I couldn't because I knew. I just knew that if I looked back, I would see my own face staring at me. "Time's up." His voice was wrong, like mine, but stretched, distorted like a recording played at the wrong speed. I forced my hand forward, gripping the door handle. It was warm, too warm, like something alive. I twisted it. The door wouldn't budge. Behind me, the breathing grew louder, and then he laughed, not a normal laugh. A dry, rattling sound, like something choking on dust. "You don't get it, do you?" His fingers dragged down my shoulder, slow and deliberate. "You were never supposed to find this door." I threw my weight against it, desperate. The handle twisted, but the door still wouldn't open. The walls around me pulsed. The entire hallway felt like it was breathing. This wasn't a place. This was a trap. And I had walked right into it. "Where do you think it leads?" he whispered. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't listen. His mouth was next to my ear now. "You really think there's a way out?" My heart pounded. I couldn't think. I needed to think. And then the lights flickered, and I saw it. A shadow, not mine, but his, except the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, too many arms. And in that moment, I realized this thing wasn't me at all. It never had been. A surge of adrenaline shot through me. I let go of the handle and did the only thing I could think of. I turned around, and for the first time, I saw his real face, and that's when I started screaming. I wish I hadn't turned around. I wish I had kept my eyes shut, kept fumbling with the door, done anything but look. Because now, I can't unsee it. I can't forget. His face was mine, but wrong. The features were there. The nose, the mouth, the eyes. But they were off, like someone had tried to sculpt me from memory and got the details just slightly incorrect. The eyes were too large, too dark. The mouth was stretched into something that wasn't a smile, and the skin God. The skin, it was loose, like it had been stitched on, and beneath it, something moved, something squirmed. I stumbled backward, my stomach lurching. It tilted its head, like a bird, like it was studying me. Then it whispered, "I was here first." I clapped my hands over my ears. No, this isn't real. You don't belong. I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't breathe. Give it back. The walls shuddered. The door behind me groaned. I turned and it was open. I didn't hesitate. I ran. The hallway twisted around me. The floor heaved beneath my feet like something alive. The whispers followed. Give it back. Give it back. Give it back. I threw myself forward, through the doorway, into the darkness beyond. And as I fell, I heard one final whisper, "You can't run forever." Then silence, and when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the security office anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere worse. I hit the ground hard. The air was thick, pressing against my skin like a wet sheet. I gasped, struggling to my feet, my head spinning. Where the hell was I? The security office was gone. The cameras, the monitors, the desk, everything had been swallowed by the void behind me. Now, I stood in a long, empty hallway. No doors, no windows, just walls, endless walls. I turned in a slow circle, my heartbeat throbbing in my ears. The floor beneath me was wrong, too smooth, like polished stone, but warm, almost like skin. I swallowed hard. The hallway stretched forward, curving into the distance, disappearing into darkness, and then a sound. A slow, wet dragging. Somewhere ahead of me, something was waiting, something was moving. I turned and ran the other way, but my footsteps, they didn't sound right. I glanced down and my stomach lurched. The floor was rippling beneath me, pulsing, like I was running across something alive. I staggered, my breath catching in my throat. The hallway shifted, the walls narrowed, the dragging sound grew louder, and then a whisper, right behind me. "Where do you think you're going?" I spun around and the hallway was gone. Now, I was standing in my own house. My living room, the lights were dim, the air was stale, but something was wrong. I could feel it. Something was watching me. I turned toward the hallway that led to my bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A figure, tall, still, standing in the darkness. I squinted. My breath caught in my throat. It was me, but it wasn't, not entirely. It smiled, and in my own voice it whispered, "You're almost out of time." I stood frozen in my living room, staring at the thing that wore my face. It didn't move, it didn't blink, it just smiled. Not a natural smile, not one I had ever made in my life. It stretched too far, revealing too many teeth. The air thickened around me, heavy and suffocating. My lungs felt slow, like I was trying to breathe underwater. I clenched my fists. What are you?" The thing tilted its head. A perfect mimicry of me, you already know. Its voice was mine, but not quite. A distorted echo of me. As if someone had taken a recording of my voice and stretched it, warped it into something unnatural. I took a step back. The floor beneath me felt wrong, softer than it should be, like flesh, like it was breathing. I swallowed hard, glancing at my surroundings. Everything looked like my house. The same furniture, the same pictures on the walls. But something felt off, like a copy of my home, made by something that had only seen it in a dream. I turned back to the thing standing in the hallway. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light. You shouldn't have looked at the cameras. I felt my stomach drop. "What?" I whispered. The smile never faded. It simply raised one hand and pointed past me. My body went rigid. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct in me screamed not to. But something moved behind me, slow, deliberate, like footsteps, but wrong. The sound was too wet, too heavy. I turned, and everything shifted. I wasn't in my house anymore. The walls melted away, stretching outward like liquid. The ceiling disappeared. Now I stood in a vast, empty void. A place without walls, without doors, without an exit, and I wasn't alone. They stood in the darkness, just at the edges of my vision. Dozens, no, hundreds, tall, motionless figures. Their faces were blank, no eyes, no mouths, just smooth, pale skin. They surrounded me, standing too still. And as I watched, one of them twitched, then another, then another. All at once, their heads began turning toward me. Not like normal movement, jerky, sudden, snapping, as if they had been waiting for me to notice them. And then, in unison, they whispered, a sound so soft, yet so loud in my skull that I felt like my head would split open. Almost out of time, I ran. I don't know where I was going, there was nowhere to go. But I ran anyway. The figures didn't follow. They didn't need to. Because no matter how far I ran, no matter how many steps I took, I could still hear them. The whisper never faded, almost out of time. And then a hand grabbed my shoulder. I screamed, twisting away. My breath came in ragged gasps. I was back in my house, standing in my living room. But something was different. The house felt empty, no sound, no movement, like a house long abandoned. And then I saw it, a new camera feed. On the TV screen, a live security feed of my front door, and someone was standing there, not knocking, not moving, just waiting, a figure in the dark, no face, no expression, just standing, and then it tilted its head, and the TV shut off, leaving me in silence. I stood there, staring at the blank TV screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The house was silent, too silent. I knew what I had seen, the figure standing outside my front door, watching, waiting. I didn't move, didn't dare to, because deep down, I already knew what was coming next. And then knock. The sound shattered the silence like a gunshot. Once, twice, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I felt something cold spread through my veins. It was here. I turned my head, staring toward the door. The hallway leading to it felt longer than before, like the house was stretching, shifting itself around me. I didn't move, not at first, but then knock, 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 louder this time, more insistent. I stepped forward, my body moving on its own. My legs felt weak, like I wasn't in control anymore. Something deep inside me screamed to stop, to turn around, to run, but I didn't, I couldn't. The closer I got to the door, the more I felt it, the wrongness. Like something was standing just behind it, something that shouldn't exist. And then, just as I reached for the handle, the peephole went dark. Something was covering it, something alive. I could hear it breathing, a wet, labored sound, slow, deliberate. I swallowed hard, pressing my ear against the door. Silence, then a voice, my voice, let me in. I staggered back, my heart slamming against my ribs. No, no, that wasn't possible, that wasn't me, but it spoke again, calm, patient. You've already seen me, you know what I look like. I felt something crawl up my spine. My voice, but wrong, just like before, just like the thing that had mimicked me. I shook my head, forcing myself to step back. I'm not opening the door. Silence, and then a soft, amused laugh. The sound slithered through the door, wrapping itself around my brain. You think the door matters. The lights flickered. The air turned thick, pressing down on my skin like invisible hands. And then every door in my house creaked open at once. The bedroom, the closet, the bathroom, even the cabinet doors in the kitchen. One by one, swinging open, slowly, silently, like they were welcoming something inside. And then, from deep within the house somewhere in the dark, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, not from the front door, from behind me. I turned around, my body screaming in protest. The hallway stretched out before me, dark, endless, and at the very end of it a shadow, tall, unmoving. Watching, and then it tilted its head, and began to walk toward me. The shadow moved with slow, deliberate steps. Each one sent a cold pulse through my chest. It wasn't rushing, it wasn't hiding, it was just coming. And I knew somehow, I knew, that if it reached me, if it got close enough to touch, I wouldn't be me anymore. My breath hitched. I took a step back, my heel nearly catching on the rug. The shadow kept walking. The hallway around it stretched. The walls seemed to pull away, dissolving into a void of darkness. But the thing never broke pace, never hurried, never ran. It was walking like someone who already knew the outcome. Like someone who had all the time in the world. I forced myself to move, spun on my heel, ran. I crashed into the living room, my feet slamming against the hardwood. The front door was right there. I grabbed the handle, twisted. Locked, no, I never locked it. My fingers fumbled for the deadbolt, but before I could turn it, a whisper. Right behind me, where are you going? My body turned on its own, slowly, like something was pulling my strings. And there, standing just a few feet away, was me. I froze. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It was me. Same face. Same tired eyes. Same rumpled clothes. But its head was tilted at a slight, unnatural angle. In its mouth it was smiling. A wide, stretching smile that didn't belong on my face. I stepped back. My copy stepped forward, perfectly in sync. Why are you running? It asked. The voice was mine, but wrong. Like it was trying too hard. Like it was shaping the words instead of speaking them. I shook my head. This wasn't real. I had to wake up. I had to, then it took another step, and I felt it. The floorboards beneath my feet, the air pressing against my skin. No dream, no illusion. This was real. I backed against the door. My copy stopped, tilting its head again, watching, waiting, and then, slowly, painfully slowly, it raised one hand and pointed at my chest. You're not supposed to be here. The words weren't a threat. They were a statement. Like it had already decided how this ended. Something in me snapped. I lunged, not away, forward. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and swung. The impact should have shattered its face. Should have sent it stumbling, but instead the lamp passed right through it, like cutting through smoke. For a second I thought I had won. That it was nothing but an illusion. Then a hand closed around my wrist. I gasped, cold, too cold, like something had reached inside me, like something was taking hold, and then my copy leaned in, until its mouth was just beside my ear, and whispered, I think it's my turn now. The grip on my wrist tightened. Not like fingers, not like skin. It felt like something was sinking into me, like cold, wet roots burrowing deep beneath my flesh. I tried to pull away, tried to scream, but my throat locked up. The air in my lungs froze, and then it started pulling. I collapsed to my knees, my whole body convulsing. The thing that looked like me loomed over me, still smiling, still watching. I could feel it now, a deep, twisting pressure in my chest, like something was unthreading me from the inside. Like something was peeling me apart. Not yet. It whispered. Its voice was softer now, almost gentle. You need to see first. And then it let go. I gasped, fell forward, choking on air. My vision swam. I felt light, like something had been taken, like something had been stolen. I lifted my head, and I saw myself. Standing, breathing, but it wasn't me. It was him. The one with my face. The one with my voice. And he was moving. Turning toward the door, toward the outside, toward my life. Wait, my voice cracked. I tried to stand. Tried to stop him, but my legs wouldn't listen. And then he reached for the doorknob, and whispered, You stay here. He stepped out. And the door slammed shut. The door slammed shut, and suddenly the room was wrong. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They were breathing, expanding and contracting, like the inside of some great, sleeping thing. I stumbled forward, slamming my fist against the door. Let me out, I screamed. No answer. I grabbed the handle cold, too cold. It seared my palm like dry ice. I yanked my hand away, skin burning from the touch. Then I heard it, a voice, but not from the door. Not from outside, from behind me. You were never supposed to leave. I turned slowly. The room was shifting. The shadows in the corners weren't just dark, they were deep. They stretched like open mouths, like tunnels leading somewhere I didn't want to go. And in the center of the room, a figure, tall, unmoving. At first, I thought it was just another shadow. But then it stepped forward. I wanted to run. I couldn't. My legs were frozen. My breath stuck in my throat. The figure loomed closer, stepping into the dim light, and my blood turned to ice. It was me, not the thing that had taken my place outside. This one was worse. Its face was almost right, almost, but the features were stretched, as if someone had pulled at my skin from the inside. The eyes were too big, too round, and filled with something that looked like static. You left the door open. It whispered. The voice was mine, but it was layered, distorted, like a recording playing backward beneath the words. I took a step back. My heel hit the door. I didn't mean to. I stammered. I didn't know. You let him out. The figure tilted its head. The movement was jerky. Wrong. Now he's wearing you. My stomach dropped. The thing outside ***, the one in my body ***, wasn't just pretending. It had taken me, completely, my voice, my face, my life, and I was stuck here, in this breathing room, with whatever this was. The thing that looked like me grinned, but the smile was too wide, too sharp. Don't worry, it whispered. It reached up, grabbed its own face, and began to peel. Skin split, flesh tore. The sound was wet. It pulled, tearing its face away like old wallpaper. Beneath, darkness, a swirling, moving void. It leaned closer. You'll get used to it. The thing peeled its face away completely. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. Underneath the torn skin, there was nothing, just darkness, a void where my face should have been, shifting like a mass of writhing shadows. Then it spoke again, not with words, with voices, a chorus of whispers, all layered over one another. Some of them were mine, others were different, older, angrier. You let him out. I staggered backward, pressing myself against the locked door. I didn't know. I gasped. I didn't know what would happen. The thing took a step forward. Its voice shifted, became clearer. It spoke in my voice. He knows everything about you now. The room shuddered. The walls pulsed like veins beneath skin. The ceiling breathed, and behind the faceless figure, the shadows started to move. I could hear something crawling in the dark. Something with too many hands. You belong here now. The thing whispered. No. I said, shaking my head. No, I don't. It tilted its head, considering me. Then leave. It stepped aside. Behind it, the shadows parted. I could see something beyond them, a hallway stretching into blackness. And at the very end of it, a door. A way out. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Footsteps pounded behind me, faster than my own. The shadows clawed at my ankles, whispering in voices I almost recognized. But I didn't stop. I reached the door. It was old, wood splintered and warped, but it was real. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Bright light, blinding, searing light. I staggered forward, falling to my knees. My lungs burned. My skin tingled. And when my vision cleared, I was back. I was in the security office, sitting at my desk. The monitors glowed in the dim room, showing the same empty hallways I'd been patrolling for weeks. Had I imagined it? Had I ever even left? I turned to the clock. 3:33 a.m. Exactly the time it had been when all of this started. The hairs on my arms rose. I reached for the desk, for something, anything solid to anchor myself to reality. My fingers brushed against paper, a drawing. I lifted it with shaking hands. It was me, sitting right where I was now. But standing behind me was him, watching, smiling, waiting. The drawing felt heavier than paper should. It wasn't just ink and graphite, it was something else. Something alive. The lines shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them, like they were breathing. And Mr. Gray, if that's even what he was closer, not just standing behind me now, leaning in, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, inches from my ear. The longer I stared, the more I felt like I could hear him, breathing or worse, laughing. I threw the drawing down. I needed to get out of here. I bolted for the door. It slammed shut before I could reach it. I grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. No. I turned back to the monitors. They were different now, not grainy black, and white security feeds. Not the empty hallways I'd seen 1,000 times before. They were showing me, all of them, every screen, every angle. Me in real time. Except not alone. In the bottom right screen, the one pointed at the entrance to the security room, something was standing just outside. Tall, thin, too tall. I couldn't make out his face, but I knew who it was. Mr. Gray. And then the feed cut out. All the monitors went black. The radio crackled to life. It closer. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't human. And it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside the room. I turned slowly. The chair by the desk was empty. The walls were the same dull gray as before. But in the corner of the room, where there had been nothing before, there was a mirror. A tall, full-length mirror, and something was inside it. Not just a reflection, something else, and it was watching me. Waiting, smiling. I didn't own a mirror like this. It stood at least 7 feet tall, with an old wooden frame that looked burned at the edges. The glass wasn't smooth. It rippled, like the surface of a lake before a storm. And inside, I saw myself. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't copying me. I was standing still, heart pounding, hands shaking, but in the mirror, I was moving. The other me tilted his head, grinning, not a normal grin either, too wide. The corners of his mouth stretched past his cheeks, past where lips should end. Teeth lined the entire grin, sharp and uneven, as if they had been added later. And then he raised his hand. Not to wave, not to reach out. He pointed at something behind me. I spun around. The room was empty. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection was laughing now, soundless, but shaking with laughter. I grabbed the chair from the desk, my fingers tight around the backrest, and swung it with everything I had. Crash, the mirror shattered. Glass rained down in jagged shards. My breath came in ragged gasps as I watched the pieces move. Not fall, but crawl. Like they were alive. Like they were trying to put themselves back together. And then, a piece of glass no bigger than my palm reflected something. A face, not mine. His, Mr. Gray. He was in the shards, in all of them, staring, watching, smiling, and one by one, the shards started to rise. The shards rose from the ground, not all at once. One by one, they lifted, floating as if pulled by invisible strings. The jagged edges gleamed in the dim light, twisting in the air like they had minds of their own, and inside each shard, his face. Mr. Gray, dozens of him, grinning. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. My back hit the wall, and I realized I had nowhere to go. The shards were still rising, still shifting, their edges turning toward me, like they were aiming, like they were going to fly straight into me. I had seconds, maybe less. I did the only thing I could. I ran. I bolted from the room just as the shards shot forward. They hit the walls, the door frame, the floor, sharp edges embedding into the wood. A few grazed past me, slicing into my arm, my side, my leg, but I didn't stop. I ran down the hallway, straight to Lily's room. I had to make sure she was safe, but when I threw open the door, she was already awake, standing in the middle of her room, holding a piece of glass, and she was staring into it, her little hands trembling. Lily. My voice was raw. Put that down. She lifted her head. Her face was pale, and in a whisper she said, "He's inside." Then she turned the shard toward me, and inside the reflection, Mr. Gray was standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because if I turned, if I looked, he would be there. Lily's hands trembled around the shard of glass, her eyes wide, her breath coming in short, quick gasps. The reflection was clear as day. Mr. Gray loomed behind me, smiling, waiting. "He's inside," Lily whispered again. And then he moved, not in real life, in the reflection. His long, spindly arms stretched forward, his fingers curling toward my throat. But I felt nothing. My breath hitched. My body was rigid with fear, but nothing was touching me. No fingers wrapping around my skin. No weight against my back. It was just the reflection, but Lily saw it. She saw something I couldn't feel. "Lily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "listen to me. I need you to put that shard down, okay? Just put it on the floor." Her eyes darted between me and the glass. "But he's right there." She was terrified, and that terrified me. I had to do something. I reached forward, slowly, carefully, then the light flickered. And Lily screamed. The glass in her hand shattered, not from the force of her grip, not from her throwing it. It exploded on its own. Tiny fragments of glass rained down, catching the dim glow of her nightlight. The reflections, all of them, shattered with it. I lunged forward, scooping her up in my arms. It's okay, I got you." She clung to me, her small hands fisting into my shirt. And then I felt it, a presence, cold, heavy, behind me. This time, I didn't need a reflection to tell me he was there. I knew. I felt the air shift. I felt the weight press against my skin. A whisper, right by my ear, "Almost time." I turned. And for the first time, I saw him with my own eyes. Mr. Gray, no longer in the glass, no longer in the drawings. Standing in Lily's room and smiling. Mr. Gray was real. Not just a figment of Lily's imagination. Not just a drawing or a warped reflection. He was standing right in front of me. Lily was shaking in my arms, her tiny fingers gripping my shirt so tightly it hurt. She wouldn't look at him, couldn't, but I did. I had no choice. His hollow eyes bore into mine, empty and endless. His mouth stretched too wide, too unnatural, curved into a grin. But the worst part, he didn't move. He just stood there as if waiting. For what? For me. My instinct screamed at me to run. To grab Lily and get out of that room, out of the house, out of town if I had to. But my feet wouldn't move. My body was locked in place, frozen between fight and flight. And then he spoke. "You brought me here." The voice wasn't human. It was layered, like 1,000 whispers stacked on top of each other, crawling under my skin. My breath hitched. "What do you mean?" I forced out. The grin widened. "You saw me. You let me in." No, that wasn't possible. This thing, this entity had been haunting Lily. She was the one who kept drawing him. She was the one who first spoke his name. But now I realized the truth. Lily hadn't let him in. I had, by believing, by doubting my own sanity, by fearing him. That's all he needed, and now it was too late. The air in the room shifted. Lily let out a small whimper, burying her face in my chest, and then, for the first time, Mr. Gray moved, his limbs stretched unnaturally, his body twisting as he took his first step forward. Then another. He was coming closer. I turned and ran. Holding Lily tight, I bolted out of the room, nearly slipping on the hardwood floor. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The hallway lights flickered wildly, casting long, shifting shadows. I could hear him behind us. His footsteps weren't heavy, weren't loud, but they were there, slow, methodical. I reached the stairs and stumbled down, barely catching myself before I hit the bottom. My mind was racing. Where could we go? What could we do? The front door. If I could just get outside. Bang. The door slammed shut. I skidded to a stop, my pulse hammering. I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped. Lily was crying now, small, shuddering sobs against my chest. I turned, pressing my back to the door. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything, a weapon, an escape, a miracle. And then I heard it. A whisper from everywhere, from nowhere, no more hiding. I sucked in a sharp breath, and then the lights went out. The house was drowning in darkness, not the kind you get when you switch off a light. This was deeper, thicker, like the air had been sucked out of the world, leaving behind something unnatural. Lily clung to me, her little fingers digging into my skin. "Daddy," she whimpered. "I can't see." Neither could I, but I could hear him. Soft footsteps against the hardwood floor. Coming closer. I had to move, had to get us out. I reached for my phone, my last lifeline, but the screen was dead. No glow, no battery warning, just black. I turned toward the staircase, fumbling in the dark. The floorboards beneath my feet groaned. And then a whisper, right against my ear. "Where are you going?" I lunged forward, nearly tripping as I stumbled toward the stairs. My arms tightened around Lily, shielding her as I took the steps 2 at a time. Somewhere behind us, the whispering grew into a chorus. Voices overlapping, melting together into a low, inhuman hum. I reached the top, heart hammering, legs burning. The bedroom, I thought. It was the only place left. I burst through the door, slamming it behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I fumbled for anything, to barricade it. The dresser, the chair. I shoved them against the door, my muscles screaming. It wouldn't hold him back for long, but it was all I had. Then I turned to Lily. She was shaking, her tiny body curled up on the bed, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at something. I followed her gaze, and my blood turned to ice. A new drawing was pinned to the wall. It hadn't been there before. It was fresh. The blue crayon still gleamed under the dim glow of the streetlights outside. And the picture it was of me, lying in bed, and standing over me was Mr. Gray, watching, waiting. Smiling, the air shuddered. The barricade behind me shifted. And then, with a slow, sickening creak, the door began to open. The door shouldn't have opened. I had shoved the dresser and the chair against it with all my strength. It should have held, but as I watched, heart pounding, it moved anyway, not violently, not the way a person would shove it. It slid open slowly, deliberately, like something was toying with me. A breath of ice-cold air crept into the room, snaking around my ankles. Behind me, Lily gasped, and then the whispering returned. I reached for Lily, pulling her against me. Her tiny body was stiff with fear. "Don't look," I whispered. I don't know if I was talking to her or myself, because I knew what was standing in that doorway. I could feel him, watching, waiting. That same unnatural presence, the same that had slithered through our lives for weeks, lurking in the edges of drawings and the corners of my vision, was here. In the room, I couldn't run. There was nowhere left to go, but I could fight. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it toward the doorway. The second it left my hands, the darkness devoured it. It didn't hit the wall, didn't shatter. It simply vanished, like the shadows had swallowed it whole. And then he moved. A long, spindly arm stretched forward. Too long, too thin. Fingers like gnarled roots reached toward me, and for the first time I saw his face. It was like looking into a void, not a face at all, really, just a shape pretending to be one. 2 hollow eyes. A too wide grin, stretched into something that barely resembled a mouth. A face made of nothing, and yet I knew it was smiling. Behind me, Lily screamed, and then the lights flickered. For just a second, the room was bathed in dim, yellow light, and Mr. Gray was gone, but the drawings weren't. They were everywhere, scattered across the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Hundreds of them, thousands, every single one was the same. Mr. Gray standing over my bed, waiting. The whispering grew louder. Lily was sobbing now, clutching my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. And then one last sound, something I had dreaded hearing, something that made every hair on my body stand on end. A voice, low, hollow, coming from the dark. It said one word, time. The light flickered again, and then everything went black. Silence, the kind that presses against your ears, filling every inch of space. A silence so deep, so unnatural, that it felt like the world had stopped. I couldn't move. Lily clutched my arm, trembling. I could hear her tiny, ragged breaths against my shoulder. And in the dark something moved. The whispering was gone. Instead, there was a sound, a slow, deliberate tap, like fingernails dragging against the wall. Tap, 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 coming closer. I reached for my phone, fumbling with shaking fingers. No signal, no light, just the darkness pressing in around us. I knew what would happen if I turned around. I knew what I would see, but I had no choice. I turned, and there he was, Mr. Gray, standing in the doorway. Too tall, too thin, his head tilted unnaturally far to the side, like a puppet waiting for its strings to be pulled. And that face, that hollow, stretched grin. "Lily," I whispered, "close your eyes." She whimpered but obeyed, burying her face against my chest. Mr. Gray took a step forward. Tap, another, tap, and then he spoke. His voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was inside me, in my head, in my bones, deep, hollow, and endless. "You drew me here." I squeezed my eyes shut. No, I didn't. I never drew him, never called him, never wanted any of this, but Lily did. Lily drew him. And maybe that was enough. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something I had seen in one of those endless, horrifying drawings. But I reached for the nightstick and grabbed a handful of crayons and threw them. Mr. Gray stopped. For the first time, his grin faltered. His hollow eyes flickered, like a flame struggling against the wind. Lily gasped. "It's working," she whispered. And suddenly, I knew what to do. I grabbed a piece of paper, my hands shaking. Lily scrambled beside me, picking up a crayon. Together, we started drawing, not him, not the thing in front of us, but something else, a door, a closed door, a lock, a heavy chain. And as the crayon scratched across the paper, the air around us shifted. The whispering returned furious. The room shook. Mr. Gray lurched forward, but his form was flickering. I kept drawing the door, the lock, the chains, and then, with a final stroke, the whispering stopped. I looked up. Mr. Gray was gone. The room was still, silent, like he had never been there at all. Lily collapsed against me, sobbing. "It's okay," I whispered, holding her tight. "It's over, we did it." And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The next morning, we left. I didn't care about packing. I didn't care about anything except getting as far away as possible. The house stood silent behind us, its walls covered in drawings we never made. I didn't look back, neither did Lily, but as we pulled away, she whispered, "We forgot to throw the crayons away."